Salutations, Legion of Doom. Welcome to Podcast The Storm, where socially awkward outcasts, crazy weirdos, and all around nerds convene to talk and debate all things pop culture. With me, as always, is my co-host, the nerdy occultist, aka the authenticator, Dalton L. Mortimer.
Good evening, folks.
And I am your host / Time Lord wannabe, the Brainstorm of Pop Culture. And hello, Ed Brewer, with him saying my 17th favorite podcast with the word storm in it. That kind of hurts.
I want to read that list now. I demand to know who beat us. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, all the other 16 podcasts before us. I kind of want to try harder, but I'm already doing the best I can. So,
yeah, it's niche programming you have with us, folks.
yeah,
but still, give us the list of the other 16 people who beat us out for number one, and then don't be surprised when things inextricably befall them, like in the Final Destination movie. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
I do not approve of this.
I'm
not me.
I'm not saying I'm going to curse the shit out of our competitions, but so help me. If it comes to that, it comes to that.
But yeah, well, welcome to. Thanks, Ed. Yeah, just kidding. You guys are great. I wonder if he's just saying that so you don't curse people.
So it's not just at least 17 sets of people in the podcasting community died spontaneously of aneurysms and or heart attacks. In other news, the podcast of the Storm has gained over 100,000 subscribers.
Yeah. But yeah, welcome to January. Hope everyone had a great New Year's. Yeah. So we're. Oh fuck! We're in the second.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, didn't we already do one last week that was technically?
My brain's a little off. I slept a little too long, so I'm still kind of tired. That's my bad, folks. Yeah, so not really much. It's kind of gonna be a chill stream mostly. I mean, it's us, so chill is relative.
Yeah, there will still be the beating the fuck out of stupidity, because where would we be if we didn't? But yeah.
Yeah.
We're still kind of working our way halfway through some stuff that already happened whilst we were off doing holiday related shit. So
speaking of which, don't worry, we have stuff planned for February, or we will sometime in the future. And also,
especially because episode 100 occurs in February.
Yeah, and it would be 4 weeks from now, folks. Actually, which will be the first week of February.
Yeah.
So that's going to be interesting. We have some things planned out, but we're still working on it. We got 4 weeks, but yeah. So, yeah.
In the meantime, the world seems to be going to hell again, and all we are doing is trying our damnedest to talk some sense into people who apparently have an allergy to sense.
Yeah. again, just keep you guys entertained so you don't feel like the world is depressing.
Yeah.
Or more depressing.
Yeah. The world is the fun kind of mad, not the depressing kind of mad. That is the goal of our show, is to convince you that the world is the fun and stupid kind of mad, not the depressing and stupid kind of mad.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we didn't have. There were things we were going to cover, but a lot of the things were mainly trailers from Disney. Didn't really have much to them, unfortunately.
Yeah, the Falcon and the Winter Soldier just didn't sell us, and
It sold me. I just didn't think there was much for us to talk about in it.
yeah, there's not much. There's just not much there to dig your teeth into. And as for the Kamala Khan stuff, it's not even really a trailer. It's just behind the scenes stuff, and that doesn't really tell us much. So
They're trying to sell it though. Like that's I think that's the main issue. Is like they're overselling it.
yeah, on the plus side, WandaVision starts next week, so that might give us something to talk about next week.
Yes, I still need to finish the second season of Mandalorian, but yeah. Okay. So yeah, Dalton sent this to me. This is from Wired.com. Yeah, this is Wired.com. No, fuck off. Okay, hold on. Yeah, okay. Dungeons and Dragons. Racial reckoning is long overdue. Yeah. God damn it.
Yeah, just no.
Okay, yeah, this is by Matthew Galt. This published December 31st, 2020. All right. The tabletop game storylines are infused with regressive stereotypes about race and power. Players are on a quest to rewrite the narrative.
I,
What the fuck? Like,
in
I don't.
what? You go first, and then I'll go.
I was gonna, like, and I've made it clear. Like I've said it a few times. I haven't been able to play D&D before. I mean, like I know of it and I've seen stuff about it. Obviously, and I'm very interested to try it like once to see if I like really like it or not. But no, that's not what it's about. Like it's legitimately like it's like just putting yourself. I don't know. Like I don't want to say this because it might sound less knowledgeable. It might, it's like you're putting yourself into a story, kind of, to have. It's a game essentially, is what I'm trying to say. The point is to have fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of the base thing. I think there's a lot of other things, obviously, but
Yeah, I didn't really get a chance to play D&D until I went away to college. I did my damnedest to know as much about it as I could, because that's just my approach to everything that I like, is just know all the things about the thing. But yeah, no, from what orifice are you pulling this idea that there's anything racial whatsoever about Dungeons and Dragons? Need I remind you that most geek enterprises are race, gender, everything else neutral, because the thing about geek culture is we're more concerned about the merits of the people involved and the interests of the people involved, not the demographics of the people involved. The greatest thing about, or one of the great things about geek culture is you can come from literally any walk of life, because geek culture is the culture that draws in the outcasts, the ne'er do wells, the untouchables of whatever social hierarchy you happen to be in. If you're intellectual enough and meritocratic enough to find your way into these spaces, then you are welcome there. If you can't survive the shit testing that occasionally accompanies such things, then there's the door. But it has nothing whatsoever to do with blackness or gayness or anything of that sort. I mean, take a look at us here. I mean, I'm gay, disabled, and a religious minority. Brainstormer is a mixed race person in the middle of the uh how do you call it, Brainstormer? I would say the hood, but that's not the word you use. So
Right,
maybe
well, my uncle describes it as the white ghetto. I describe it as the suburban ghetto. Still a ghetto though, but yeah,
yeah. But he's an inner city mixed race person. Um,
mostly Hispanic, but it's relative.
yeah, and I'm basically everything else. So, and at no point have I ever felt alienated by being in a geek space. If anything, the only thing that even approaches alienation for me is when other people that are geeks aren't geeky enough for me, because I tend to like really obscure characters and really weird cosmic shit. Uh, so yeah, that's the only time in geek spaces I've ever felt alienated. But certainly not when I was playing D&D with and just to drive home the point of what the fuck are you talking about. Um, one of my friends, and in fact the friend who usually did the DMing when we played D&D in college, was a trans woman. One of them was another disabled person who literally didn't have any legs. He was also a clinically diagnosed sociopath or narcissist. I don't remember which. Um, One of the other people after he left was a person who I'm convinced had borderline personality disorder or something along those lines. And one of them was a stoner with Asperger's syndrome and ADD. So this idea that geek hobbies were ever in some way exclusionary on any other basis but skill, merit, or the tendency to geek out on lore is just stupid. Those are the only things geek cultures care about, is do you know the lore of whatever hobby you're getting into? Do you care? Are you good at it? And do you have skills? If the answer is yes to all those questions, then you are welcome in a geek space, and nobody gives a fuck. Moving on.
Okay, 1 sec. All right. Dungeons and Dragons is the oldest and most popular tabletop role playing game in the world. Uh, Again, I can't clarify that because I haven't looked that much into the history of D&D, but I assume so.
It is, yes.
Okay.
I believe it was actually created by a bunch of geeky mathematicians, which is why so much of D&D is math focused.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
Which again underscores the point of D&D was made by geeks for geeks.
Yeah. As its popularity has soared, so has its player base. It's a game that was dominated by white dudes for decades, and because of that, it's got some baggage. Some of its concepts, evil races, descriptions of orcs and half-orcs that mirror racist stereotypes, and the concept of racial disadvantages don't make sense anymore in a modern context. Okay, fuck you. You are placing. Okay, not. I don't want to be assuming or anything, but I do think that the writer and a lot of people who do criticize, and I use that word loosely, D&D, are more projecting than anything. I'm not discrediting that there might have been at some point, or I do. The thing about D&D though is it's like writing a story essentially, where uh, there's no real solid. It's all about choice, if anything. Like I'm trying to find the words here. Tony, if you have anything to say, please say.
Okay, so the thing about D&D and the concept of racial advantages and disadvantages
Hmm.
has nothing to do with racism, okay? It's a simple matter of genetic predispositions, I guess would be the correct word we would use in a modern context. Genetic predisposition or disinclination. For example, using a real world example, black people are taller on average than other races, and um they are also denser physically than than quite a few other races. On the other side, Asians are shorter and more neotenous than a lot of other races. And it doesn't even necessarily need to be focused on race. For example, over in Holland, I believe, the average height is something like 6'3" or 6'6" or some shit. And they are white as the day is long, but that doesn't have anything to do with them being quote unquote superior to anyone for anything. It's just a simple matter that different people have different genetic predispositions, and that similar people have similar genetic predispositions and or disinclinations. For example, I am 5'6" on a good day. I think generally speaking I'm closer to 5'5", but it's neither here nor there. There is no way on earth I am going to be any good at basketball. And that's not even taking into account the fact that I'm crippled. Meanwhile, someone who, someone who is the size of our friend Mr. E, who is an awesome dude, by the way, who's 6'4" and built like a truck, is probably going to be much better suited for such environments. Not because he's better racially than I am or anything, but because different people have different skills and their genetics predispose them to having different skills. So if the gene pool of a given subtype, whether it's a race or not, has a natural inclination towards certain skills, or the abilities that they have make them predisposed to certain skills, then that is what it is. Likewise, people who are good at some things are bad at other things. Like, for example, Asians are smarter on average than most other races. Does this mean there are no idiotic Asians? No. Does this mean that everyone else is an idiot by comparison? No. But if you're Asian, you're generally speaking going to be more intelligent. And if you're a black person, generally speaking, you're going to have a denser bone and muscular structure and a height advantage that's going to make you more inclined toward athletics. That doesn't mean either of these groups is superior to the other one. It just means that they're better at certain things in certain contexts and have skills that the others are less likely to have. Same thing with D&D races. You can have a goblin who for some reason has a level 20 intellect if they're like a goblin wizard or some shit. Or you can have um an elf who is stupid because they classed into warrior classes and it thus didn't put any points into points into intelligence and put them all into strength and constitution. But because they're an elf or because they're a goblin, they're still going to have those racial penalties, which essentially just mean, generally speaking, this race does not go into this, and therefore they don't have any natural predisposition towards it. Deal with it. Fundamental facts of a given universe exist, whether it's our universe or some other universe or a universe that only exists in the sense of like many worlds theory where a universe gets created when someone thinks of it. It's still plays by some kind of rules. Moving on.
Yeah. Okay. The game's publisher, Wizards of the Coast, knows that and is trying to move Dungeons and Dragons into the future. By future, you mean bullshit. But many of its efforts seem half-hearted, and a lot of the work of making Dungeons and Dragons more inclusive has fallen to its fans. Yeah, because well, that's the thing though. Again, like a lot of the times is it's player created or player choice that kind of makes D&D the
Yeah,
special.
the setting is just the base. It's just the clay you have to work with. What you make that clay into, or what you turn things out of, is mostly up to the way it's played, generally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And I once again refuse to acknowledge that there was ever a universe in which D&D was exclusive.
And again, it really just depends on the DM, Dungeon Master, for anyone who didn't know.
Yeah.
What was I? Sorry, give me a sec. There. I won't deny that there is probably like the whole pandering thing that Wizard of the Coast is trying to do and not being genuine about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because, well, let's be honest, every company does that essentially
Mm-hmm.
these days. It's more just trying to get brownie points than actually trying to do anything meaningful. That's another topic for a different time, actually. Throughout the 50-year history of D&D. Huh. 50 years. It's impressive.
It's a little bit more than that actually now, but never mind. I
I
be,
don't
I, be,
know. At
I
least,
believe it was made in the 1950s ish was when Gen 1 came out.
really, I thought, huh. I thought 60s, but yeah.
I'd have to actually go back and look it up, but I'm pretty sure it's older than 50 years,
Okay.
because that would be 50 years from now would be like the 70s. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's definitely older than 50 years.
Okay. Okay. That was cool. Um, throughout the 50-year history of D&D, some of the peoples in the game, orcs and drow being two of the prime examples, have been characterized as monstrous and evil, using depictions that are painfully reminiscent of how real-world ethnic groups have been and continue to be denigrated.
Denigrated.
Denigrated. Um, you do realize D&D also takes inspiration from actual mythology, right? Like, is that something that they're forgetting?
Yeah, there's that. There's also the fact that okay, how do I want to phrase this? Go on with your point while I think about how I wanted to phrase that.
Well, yeah, like orcs and hold on, drow. I don't know exactly what a drow is, but
Drow.
drow.
I'm not sure Drow specifically has a real world mythology um
Or like inspiration or whatever.
inspiration.
But my point is that certain things that can be classified as quote unquote evil or bad or monsters um, are classified that as um, damn it, fuck. Yeah, they were more like okay. So orcs themselves, because that is an example provided, were
Mm-hmm.
considered creatures of evil and darkness because of the times that those myths were kind of created. Uh, they were more like cautionary tales to scare young children to behave and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, over time, the generic look of an orc outlook on an orc is that they are bad. But there are stories that, again, like it really just depends on whatever the DM comes up with for like the storyline and how the players react and choose to do things.
Yeah. Also, if you'll notice, a lot of the qualities that a lot of the qualities that are common among monster types are also primal in nature. Yeah, I mean, let's look at the orc. They're taller than most people in the D&D universe. They're stronger than most people in the D&D universe. They're more aggressive than most people in the D&D universe. All three of these could be equally said for a paragon figure, depending on how they're used and how they're played. The thing about um the thing about orcs is they're also essentially meant to kind of be quasi-demonic. And okay, without going into too much detail, in the pre-Christian era, this notion of the primal and the idyllic coexisting in one being was very, very common. Once Christianity came along and split everything down the middle into the idyllic is good and the primal and more hedonistic, more animalistic is bad, that sort of bifurcated everything to where everything was dualistic. But just because something is primal or hedonistic or aggressive doesn't mean that aggression can't be triggered by injustice or something. Like the people who get just because a person has aggressive tendencies doesn't mean they can't use those aggressive tendencies towards something constructive. Likewise, just because someone is very patient and very long-tempered doesn't mean they're a good person. Because sociopaths don't tend to get pissed off by goddamn anything. They just sneak and connive and manipulate shit until it either works in their favor or their enemies are destroyed. Because one of the things that marks sociopath is being extremely cold. Just because you're more quote unquote animalistic does not mean it's inherently negative. And just because you're more civilized doesn't mean you're, on paper, doesn't mean you're necessarily a good person. There are chaotic evil and lawful evil elves. Granted, I think in most versions of D&D there was a orcs needing to have a predisposition towards evil classification, but if you as the DM didn't like that, or a person wanted to play a lawful neutral orc or some shit like that, either they could play a half orc, which doesn't have the racial restriction, and gets obviously a good portion of the bonuses still, or they could just ignore the morality restriction, and you could play as a good orc or a lawful orc or whatever.
Right. Yeah, to provide an example, because you did bring up half orcs. There is, and if anyone knows what Critical Role is, one bully for you, and
Mhm.
those who don't, Critical Role is a show performed by, played by. It's a D&D game show played by a lot of talented voice actors that you would probably know a lot of. Um, but there is a character played by Travis Willingham. I believe he played Colonel Mustang in Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood.
Hmm.
Um, he's right now he's playing a half orc character called Ford, who is, well, he's actually a very heroic, noble character from what I've seen. I haven't really. It's been a while since I've watched Critical Role, so I might need to catch up. But yeah, no, he's like I said, like he is a half orc, but he has no real disposition towards evil at all, from what I've seen. So, it's again, like, it really just what the argument can really be boiled down to is how a story is interpreted or uh, constructed by the people who are playing D&D is really how it works, which is just D&D itself. So
Yeah, and this could have always been this is, and as far as we know, has always been the case.
yeah. Wizard of the Coast said in a blog post in June, that's just not right, and it's not something we believe in. I'll be honest, this apology doesn't really seem that.
Genuine.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, it seems very corporate speak and scripted, but regardless, just because similar tactics were used on in the description of orcs or in the creation of the concept of orcs, as were occasionally used by stupid people to describe other races in the real world, does not mean any description of any creature along those terms is either A, inherently bad, or B, meant to be a continuation or some kind of love letter to those people. Because you see, even stupid people usually have a rationale for doing what they do. The logic in showing, for example, in old school propaganda, black people as more animalistic was not um to make them in some way inferior inherently. The logic was, if they're similar to animals in intelligence, then we can treat them like animals, which is stupid, but it is what it is. Um, and also here's the other funny little gray area in this logic, if you like. You realize there are black people in D&D settings, right? So what happens if a black person in D&D owns an orc slave? I'm pretty sure that would break your brain, but it can happen very, very easily.
Yeah.
In fact, I was playing D&D with Corrupt once, and Corrupt, of course, is black, and he was playing an orcish slave trader. So how exactly does that fit into your orcs are synonymous with black people narrative? Moving forward. Oh, Brainstormer must have left again. Yep. Okay, he'll be right back, which means I will attempt to entertain the audience as we are waiting. I don't know. I don't know what to do that will fill in the gap. I suppose I could sing a little bit. So what should I sing? It's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay.
Got nothing to say, so I'm moving forward.
Yep.
All right. In its post, Wizard of the Coast detailed the changes it planned to make to Dungeons and Dragons. This included overhauling the way its books talked about orcs, drow, and other evil races, updating past books like Curse of Strahd with an eye to removing racially charged language and stereotypes, releasing new rules that de-emphasize racial negatives during character construction, hiring sensitivity readers, and hiring a more diverse pool of freelance writers and artists.
I,
Okay, no, I know you're going to go on a rant, but I might have a few things to say.
please.
You're taking a kind of fun out of storytelling, essentially, because that's what D&D is kind of about, which is storytelling, and also
Yeah.
playing the game, obviously. But
Mhm.
you're basically because the whole point of D&D is putting people into a story and having them change it and make it work around being reactive characters, not reactive, proactive, and influencing events in the story to make things happen, which is again how a story works. And what you're effectively doing is taking the fun out of certain things, storytelling things that could happen in a story
Mhm.
of a campaign. Like, um, like say I played an undead character, right? In a world where the undead are treated like monsters because, well, most of the time undead creatures are monsters, right?
Yes.
And I am like one of the only people who's actually trying to help. Like I'm one of the only like undead creatures that is trying to help the living by fighting my own kind. And the fact that and again, like another like that's interesting because I have that added kind of look, like the looks people would give me, or like sneering or insults and stuff. So it's kind of like a character arc, or for the world to accept me for what I am
Mhm.
and see past this rotted flesh, so to speak,
Mhm.
and see the good person underneath that.
Right. Okay. Second thing. My 2 cents. My 2 cents in this case. Um. In Dungeons and Dragons, evil is not a judgment. It is a quality that can be measured and described. Okay? Good and evil are facts of the matter in Dungeons and Dragons. So it's not so much the idea that someone is condemned to always be bad or do the wrong thing. And I bring this up because you get characters very similar to what Brainstorm was talking about a lot of the time. It can be extremely compelling to have a character be naturally predisposed to quote unquote evil, hedonism, animalistic behavior, self-destruction, yada yada. These are the things that evil qualifies as in Dungeons and Dragons. Now, think of it a little bit like a handicap. It'd be like if somebody like me, who physically cannot run, decided to become a long distance runner. I don't know why someone like me would choose to do this, but there are in fact people who are stubborn enough that would choose to do such a thing. Well, with orcs in D&D, it's very much the same thing. If they're naturally predisposed to evil, which again is quantifiable in Dungeons and Dragons, and they choose not to be anyway, then it's essentially a little bit like a addicted person dealing with a drug addiction or a handicapped person dealing with a handicap. There's virtue in the struggle that you wouldn't have without the predisposition. Likewise, a race that is naturally calibrated to evil's opposite, which again is quantifiable in Dungeons and Dragons terms, um, if a high elf, for example, which are I believe naturally correlated to good, um, chooses to do horrible things, that actually um, underlines and amplifies the evil things they do. Because if they're naturally predisposed to good and they fight against their good nature to be evil, then we judge them even more harshly for doing evil things. Whereas if an orc does something bad, we know they're naturally predisposed to doing bad things. Therefore, we actually, funnily enough, side with the orc a little bit more when we make those kind of judgment calls as the players or the viewers. Because we understand the notion of having to struggle against your own nature. We also understand the notion of the fall from grace, when a good person becomes evil, or a naturally predisposed to good person becomes evil. It's actually considered more of a tragedy because more significant things were lost. Whereas when a evil person strives to be good, it's actually more noble because we know their nature, their natural inclination is to do something else, and they work hard at being the other thing anyway. So your premise here is a little bit broken because you're assuming that evil means they must always do the bad thing, or they must always be inclined to doing the bad thing. But you forget that in D&D terms, good and evil are descriptors, not necessarily moral judgments. That's what that's one of the reasons there's another axis in D&D. You have the good to evil axis, but you also have the lawful and chaotic axis because it's more descriptive of the kind of behavior their nature is inclining them to do in this case. Moving on. Did you leave again, Brainstormer?
I'm back.
Okay.
All right. Okay. 1 sec. Okay. So this will be the next part. Tasha's Cauldron of Half Measures. Wizard of the Coast is 5 months into its quest to diversify. Again, you can hear me using the air quotes.
Oh, God.
Dungeons and Dragons. And the results are a mixed bag. On November 17th, Wizard of the Coast released Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. A book of rules that has new spells, new items, new character classes, and the much teased rules that allow players to customize their character's origin. So basically D&D.
Yeah, it's either extremely pedantic or extremely redundant, depending on exactly how you want to look at it. I've heard a lot of people complain that Tasha's Cauldron of Everything really oversimplifies things, which is the other thing. One of the things that differentiates D&D from other kinds of games is there's a lot of thought processes that have to be engaged with in order for D&D to work. It engages your mind. It's not just you can pull whatever you want to out of your hat, barring the wish spell, which even the wish spell is highly restricted in D&D terms. There's a lot of numbers, a lot of calculations, a lot of variable. It's again, it was created by math nerds for math nerds, basically. Math nerds who are apparently really, really big fans of J.R.R. Tolkien and also anthropology, which all the more power to them, honestly. But point being, by oversimplifying D&D, you honestly take out a part of the intrigue, because there's kind of a high when you can exploit when you know the rules well enough to exploit them to do really, really cool shit. Like in a recent game, I was playing Pathfinder with a couple of our friends, and we were going into this hell dimension where there was this giant motherfucking archdemon in the setting. And it had been being beaten the shit out of for several rounds, but it wasn't going anywhere. So I was playing a what's the word? Not a mystic theurge, but an arcane hierophant. There we go. Um, which is a thing in Pathfinder that's basically a mix between a cleric and a wizard. Um, and by virtue of the fact that arcane hierophants get cleric spells, I was able to create I was able to essentially sanctify the ground, but I was sanctifying the ground in hell. So I walk up to this demon and I sanctify the fucking ground, and because, it's a demon, it very much can't tolerate sanctified ground, so it goes the fuck away. Um, and that action alone, like, upped the XP on our entire party, because in order to actually battle this archdemon, we would have had to basically near kill ourselves. But because I was a smartass and accidentally created a essentially sacred area in hell, um, this demon fucked off, and that counted as defeating it. Knowing how to exploit those rules, or knowing kind of loopholes in the contracts of D&D, as it were, is part of the fun. It's like being Sherlock Holmes or Perry Mason, and exploiting your enemy's weaknesses, or exploiting, or it's a little bit like hacking. It's why people enjoy hacking, because if you know code rules well enough, you can exploit code. Well, if you know the rules of D&D well enough, you can exploit the rules of D&D. But if the Wizards of the Coast decide to oversimplify D&D to the point that literally anyone can play it, and there are no gimmicks, there are no fun cheats you can do, then it's a complete fuck up, because you've taken away that part of a D&D geek that likes to figure shit out, the part that likes the thrill of being the puzzle solver, or the puppet master, or what have you. And it also takes a large part of the fun away from the DM, because one of the things DMs like to do, a lot of them, because they're fucking assholes sometimes, is know the game better than the players know the game and use it to fuck them over, because some DMs are sadistic fuckers. But that's a conversation for another day. Moving on.
Sorry, eating a potato face thing.
Ah.
Curse of Strahd was stealth edited on D&D Beyond and republished as Curse of Strahd Revamped. Wizard of the Coast has hosted several roundtable discussions among fans and community leaders about the importance of diversity and inclusion in the tabletop role-playing space. Motherfucker, that is one of the most diverse and inclusive things in nerd culture, I would say.
Yeah. Also, I'd be curious if you asked anyone who said D&D is diverse enough as it is and doesn't need to be changed. Because it seems very, very curious to me that whenever these kind of conversations come up, you only seem to give credence to those who say, yes, we want more diversity, we want more arbitrary moral restrictions and more pandering to our demographics and shit. You never take into account the overwhelming majority of people who just say, no, D&D's been the way D&D's been for however many iterations in for however many decades, and none of us have any problems playing it, so it's fine.
Excuse me. I would say I don't like progression of D&D, sure, like maybe reworking certain things that have always been a problem, like
Yeah, you can always make improvements, but the thing is, those kind of improvements happen organically, whereas these kind of improvements, and I air quotes, have to be imposed from without for non-diegetic reasons. Like, there's nothing in the universe of D&D that makes these things a problem. It's because our morality out here in the world outside of D&D that these things are a problem, apparently.
And we use the term morality loosely.
Yeah, well, morality in the sense of it is a code of morals. Yeah.
I call it stupidity, but whatever.
Well, yeah, it's a stupid code of morals, but a code of morals is a code of morals. You can have a morality that says, killing people is excellent, but good luck universalizing that one in a world full of people who would rather not be dead. I think
That was the first idea that came to your mind. I mean, not as weird because again, like I know you, so
I'm not saying I hold to that. I'm just saying in a hypothetical, like say if you were
still it's weird how that was like the first hypothetical idea that you.
well, I had to go with something that was obviously immoral to show how just because something is ethically wrong doesn't mean it couldn't be part of a system of morality. And Lord knows there are plenty of moral systems, cough cough, Islam maybe, that think certain kinds of people are perfectly okay to kill.
Fair enough. That's
E.g. the infidels or the heretics or what have you. So yeah.
Heretics.
Mm-hmm. Moving on.
Yep. All right. Much of this is good work, especially the roundtable discussions.
Again, I'm curious how many D&D is just fine the way it is, leave it the fuck alone, and oh by the way, stop fiddling with it. People you had in these roundtable discussions, or was it perchance just people going, I found this arbitrarily racist for a series of microscopically unimportant arbitrary reasons, or I found this to be problematic because reasons, or this sins against social justice as an ideology because of this, this, and this.
I think there is an example we can do later on. I think you told me this story about D&D campaign, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Not entirely sure. But we'll get there when we get there. I don't want to like say it right now because we're still reading.
Okay.
All right. The Daniel Kwan led Dissecting the Harm Asian Racial Stereotypes Perpetuated by Modules, published under the Oriental Adventures label, is particularly good. Assuming positive intent, Oriental Adventures and similar products aren't written with racist or malicious intent, but rather through the misguided appreciation of cultural tropes, Klein says. The resulting content lacks nuance, context, and can be harmful when used to create an other in a product that was originally designed to serve as an escapist fantasy for white people. God damn it! You had something going. You fucked it.
D&D was created by math nerds and fantasy literature nerds for math nerds who were also fantasy literature nerds.
I mean, like he didn't like the first part wasn't bad. Like I could understand it and have a discussion about it, but
yeah, my only complaint with that part was everyone in D&D is in some way stereotypical or distorted.
yeah,
Like the European quote unquote characters in D&D are the most epicified and strawman version of like medieval life you could imagine. That doesn't mean that it's bad. And I imagine that if there's an African continent in a D&D universe, there are going to be stereotypes of Africans. But that, again, because we're dealing with a world painted in broad strokes, essentially, where everyone is whatever stereotype they happen to be. It's like if you took a satire and then created a world where that satire was 100% true, which is the case in most satirical works. Like D&D is kind of meant to be a love letter for literature. So the Europeans get all stereotyped as knights and lords and wizards and shit. The Asians presumably get stereotyped as, monks or kung fu experts and whatnot, and the blacks get stereotyped as warlords and shit. And here's the kicker: there are people in each of these demographics that not only like playing those characters, but really enjoy the history of their race being associated with those characters. Like, I can almost guarantee you there are dozens, if not hundreds of millions of Asians who really, really, really like kung fu movies and like that their legacy, if you like, is of those things or are connected to those things. Likewise, there are people who I'm sure um get a kick out of Native American stereotypes who themselves are Native Americans. Are you going to consider those people's desires at all? Ever? Like, are you even going to ask people who are like, actually, we enjoy this approach that you like? And this is the thing. You claim to have these round table discussions, but it seems to me like there wasn't a whole lot of round table discussion. What it seems happened was you offered a roundtable discussion, a bunch of social justice advocates showed up and gave you a list of demands of shit they wanted to change or shit they didn't like, and you rolled over. You didn't interrogate their whims or their desires at all. You didn't seek countervailing opinions or countervailing evidence to the contrary. You didn't even try to defend your original orthodoxy. You just rolled the fuck over. Because they had the moral high ground, and we can't possibly be morally bad people, derp. Never mind the fact that this is a game and thus should be kind of outside the realms of morality anyway. Like, your morality doesn't need to infect every part of your life. You can just do things because they are fun, or because you enjoy them, or because they give your life meaning in some way that's different from morality. You do know that, right? Even back when the Christians were the ones who had the quote unquote moral high ground, not everything needed to be Christian 100% of the time. Granted, I'm sure some people would have preferred it that way, but eventually we learned to tell those people to go and kick rocks. Well, why the fuck is the approach any different now that it's social justice warriors instead of fundamentalist Christians? Why can we not tell the social justice advocates to kick rocks when they say arbitrary, stupid bullshit about how orcs are somehow a racist send up to black people somehow? Even though black people do exist in the D&D universe and they're separate from orcs, therefore disproving this very stupid claim. Even so, moving on.
Okay. Yep, that can be sick. I should have done this beforehand. All right. The Dungeons and Dragons roundtables have been excellent, and they highlight the community-led efforts to make role-playing games more inclusive.
By which definition is the other thing?
Yeah, that like, and then this is a similar thing we always do, specifically with Mary Sue articles, which we haven't done in a long time.
Yeah,
those guys have kind of lost their luster and stupid.
Which might be a good thing. Maybe they're realizing that
I check on a weekly basis. It's just none of the stupid is worth our time.
Okay, well, I can dream. Then again, those are the people that sued or ended up getting sued by the Honey Badgers because they claimed the Honey Badgers were harassing people at a convention and then got them kicked out. And incidentally, fuck you, Mary Sue.
Yep.
I stand with the Honey Badgers.
Anyway, what I was gonna was, they don't define a lot of writers of these kind of articles don't define their terms for their arguments.
Yeah, they wax lyrical about a very like nebulous or abstract or a concept that might have multiple different definitions, and then they expect us to just A, know what they're talking about, and B, automatically agree with their premise.
Yeah.
Which aside from anything else is bad philosophy. If you're going to opine about a particular concept and why that particular concept is necessary in a thing, then you need to A, tell us what you mean by that concept, and B, determine what framework you're using it in. What is your particular definition of inclusion? Because inclusion can mean a lot of shit, including, ironically, different opinions. But it suddenly occurs to me that if a white supremacist, for whatever reason, played D&D and made every race that wasn't humans, or wasn't white humans, stupid and ignorant and weak and shitty, you would not be allowed to include them or their perspective into this at all. Not saying you should, but I am saying if you're going to go to the mat for social justice and your definition of inclusion, then why does no one else get any say? And why will you not tell us what you mean by inclusion? Why are we left to infer it for ourselves, even though your entire argument hinges on this notion of inclusion of yours? Like, your entire argument is revolving around this term, which you have not defined. And then you wonder why people have a problem with your argument.
Yep.
Moving on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Less great have been Wizard of the Coast revisions and updates to its own materials. Curse of Strahd revamped is an excellent example of this disconnect. During a Curse of Strahd campaign, players are helped and hindered by the Vistanti. As written, the Vistanti are itinerant in,
Itinerant, maybe?
itinerant people who live in elaborate wagons, wear bright clothing, enjoy drinking, and try to scam the players every chance they get. Okay. Most, but not all, work for Strahd, the campaign's principal villain. The Vistanti are a paper-thin Romani stereotype, and Wizard of the Coast promised to update Curse of Strahd with the help of a Romani consultant. So, what did they change to or remove?
Again, everyone is a stereotype of themselves in a medieval setting in D&D.
Yep.
So the Middle Eastern culture is probably going to take a lot of cues from the Middle Eastern culture of the time around the Middle Ages. The African race is probably going to take some cues from where Africa was during the Middle Ages. The Romani send up is going to be a send up to where the Romani were in the Middle Ages. And during the Middle Ages, the Romani were known to be wandering.
Nomads.
Huh?
Nomads.
Thank you. They were known for being wandering nomads and for making a lot of their money, basically doing
Shows.
parlor tricks essentially, and or being like the village healer or the village wise woman. There's nothing whatsoever wrong with that, and I bet a lot of people who are Romani would enjoy playfully kind of homaging that section of their history, or at least playing into it in the same way that a European person or a white person, quote unquote, might enjoy playing into the role of the Star Wars knight hero figure, the Lancelot type or the Galahad type. The Romani person might enjoy playing basically what amounts to a gypsy fortune teller, because it's called it this. Okay, this is one of my main issues with this. it makes no allowance for humor or self-awareness. You cannot laugh at yourself in this context anymore. Because if you're the kind of person who likes their racial stereotype or can laugh at it or even can enjoy it ironically, you are forbidden from doing that in this setting. Basically, according to the statement of Wizards of the Coast, you may not be a Romani person who likes playing a gypsy fortune teller, and you may not be a black person who likes playing a warlord, or you may not be a white person who enjoys playing a knight. Unfortunately, like, and yet you don't understand how that completely undermines the setting of D&D, because that's the point of D&D. It was basically, what if all of those stereotypes of the medieval era, what if all of those approaches people had to the medieval era were actually true? What would the world look like? It's basically a slightly more epicified, more realistic version of what Terry Pratchett tried to do with this world. But I bet you if Terry Pratchett tried to be a DM in a D&D game, you would say that he was playing it wrong because he was being satirical.
Oh, dude, could you imagine a D&D campaign handled by Terry Pratchett?
I so much would I love to play that game, like so much.
It'd be weird as hell, I'm sure.
I honestly, I want to know if somebody made a Discworld RPG now. I want that. I want to play that.
I believe there are click and point adventures.
Oh, but no tabletop. Somebody make me a Discworld variant of D&D. I want that.
To be fair, I don't know much about Discworld besides like basic stuff. So
Right, but somebody who's into like designing tabletop games and shit, do that. You'll make a fortune because Terry Pratchett is still really fucking popular. Yeah, BBC, instead of fucking over Doctor Who for the 500th time, why don't you license me a Terry Pratchett Discworld tabletop game, and then maybe I'll have something to enjoy about the BBC again.
Yeah. Okay. Moving forward.
Moving forward.
All right. The original publication. Excuse me. The original publication included the sentence, although they can seem lazy and irresponsible to outsiders, the Visanti are serious people, quick to act when their lives or traditions are threatened. The revised edition removed the lines about laziness and irresponsibility. The revised edition also removed a single use of the word "vardo" to describe the Visanti wagons, a direct reference to Romani. Okay, well that's more just.
Okay, go back. So you're saying that in the original text, it simply said it may seem to outsiders that the Visanti are like this, but they're not.
Yeah, that's first impressions. Like,
what the fuck is wrong with that? You're not even. It'd be different if you said the Visanti are lazy and yada yada yada. It would be very different if you said that, but you didn't even say that. You opened with the qualifier of it seems like that to everyone else, but that's because everyone else doesn't know them very well. Holy fuck. You even started by giving ground to them, by actually pointing out this was just, you acknowledged the stereotype was wrong to begin with, and people still had a problem with that. The fuck? Somehow calling out everyone else for being idiots and not paying attention somehow says something negative about them. I don't get this.
Yeah, it's and I also want to point out the whole the single word thing, which direct which was
the Vardu, which is I believe the kind of wagon that the Romani are famous for using.
Okay, so it's not bad or anything. Like, look, if this was framed in negative connotation, I could kind of understand, but it's not though. The thing is, the Vardo thing, and like it's similar to what I did for my fantasy series I'm working on, right? That's
Mhm.
um, is that more or not? It's just like it's a fun little Easter egg for anyone who's willing to like pay attention, or it's
Yeah.
I don't.
It's just a signifier of these are our universe's equivalent to the Romani. And why shouldn't D&D have a in like an in-universe equivalent to the Romani? Hell, Castlevania did this with the speakers and nobody batted a freaking eye. The speakers are basically Romani in Netflix's version of Castlevania anyway.
I
You
mean,
can
to be
make it you
fair,
can make more of an argument with the game, but it's still there. They're very much supposed to be Romani. Or gypsies, which honestly I'm kind of annoyed that we can't use that we're not supposed to use the word gypsy anymore because like the word gypsy is just cool.
yeah, I think they're like you can even use that as a name, I believe.
Yeah, like I don't see I don't like I know that apparently the word gyp comes from gypsy, so there's this idea of them being shifty or trickstery. But in all honesty, when I think of the word trickster, I think of intelligence. A trickster is somebody who's smart enough and street both in terms of like actual intelligence and street smarts enough to get away with shit. Who doesn't want to be the guy who can get away with shit? Like how many likable trickster characters are there in every story ever? It's even an archetype unto itself. I don't understand. And again, I might not know because I'm not Romani, but I see no reason why being known as the smart people who get away with shit, which is what trickster essentially means, is a bad thing. Especially when, for a long time, Romani did make their livings using, parlor tricks and folk wisdom and folk magic and shit. And there's nothing wrong with that either. As somebody who studies, various kinds of folk magic, I honestly I can there are times when I can kind of think that backwoods folk magic like hoodoo and root work and conjure and I know a little bit less about Romani folk magic, but I've still touched on it occasionally. Folk magic is at least anthropologically more interesting than ceremonial shit. I tend to favor ceremonial shit when I'm practicing more, but from a just the history of the art perspective, folk magic is more interesting because it's essentially the magic people do when they don't have the resources to do the other kind. What are you gonna do when you don't have a ritual circle to hand or a staff and rod and everything that is required to do ritual magic? You're going to substitute shit that you do have on hand, like candles and pins and poppets and what have you. And that's cool. It's the kind of shit like anything else, it's making do with what you have.
Right.
I realized that was a completely weird tangent to go on, but it annoys me.
No, I,
Um,
I get you. Okay. That's the bulk of the changes to the Vistanti in the revised Curse of Strahd. Aside from from a few lines pulled, the characterization is largely the same. I mean, don't fix what's not broken, kind of deal here.
yeah, don't yeah.
They
And
still,
also the changes that were made were completely unnecessary to begin with because again to call back to what we were saying earlier, even the original pointed out that anyone who thinks they're just lazy and shifty and tricksy are stupid.
hmm
That doesn't mean the Vistanti are stupid. It means the people who would stereotype the Vistanti are stupid.
Yep.
And the same, by the way, was true of anyone who would stereotype the Romani. It doesn't mean the Romani are stupid. It means the people who think they know a person just by looking at them are stupid. Which, by the way, those people are almost universally stupid. Anyone who would judge anyone based on their demographic instead of their personhood is a moron. Very much by definition.
They still lay curses on people and use a power called the Evil Eye, get drunk in scripted scenes, and attempt to con the players out of their fortune.
Okay. Now you are stepping in my area of expertise. So I'm going to have to do the thing where I provide the necessary exposition. For the record, okay, the Evil Eye, as it was called, was actually a protective amulet. The reason it was called the Evil Eye was because people who saw it were dumb. Because essentially, there was a logic that the envy of other people was an energy that could hinder a person. So, like, if someone looked at you with envy or anger or lust or greed or what have you, the energy from their gaze could harm your prospects. So they created a eye-shaped amulet that was meant to stare back and essentially act as a wall against that energy. That's where the evil eye comes from. Not from actually cursing people using an evil eye, but from protecting yourself from those kind of gazes. Anyone who bothered to do 5 seconds of research could have told you that, because they still make evil eye, quote unquote, protection amulets. It's still a thing, not only in foreign countries, but in, modern, like, you can walk into basically any like pagan or occult shop, and I'm sure you can find some piece of jewelry with the quote unquote evil eye symbol on it. But that doesn't mean it's actually an evil thing. It's a protection amulet. You stupid fucks. And also, if you want to honestly tell me that there were no curses in Romani folk magic, I'm going to laugh at you. There were curses in every folk magic system because, unfortunately, people sometimes pissed other people off. And as with anything else, magical technology was used to get even with people who piss us off sometimes. And also, some people deserve it sometimes. When people are being dumbasses, they deserve the consequences of their actions.
Right. Okay, so we got a few comments here before we move on with the article. Ed Brewer said at 9:15, "Are you studying the magic or the art of the con?" That's for you.
I haven't really done much research into the art of the con, really, but no, I have actually read at least a couple books on Romani folk magic, and it's interesting. But again, I'm not going to talk with any great authority on it because compared to other kinds of folk magic that I've studied, I don't know as much about it as I should. I've studied a little bit of Pennsylvania Dutch hex magic too. I've studied hoodoo. I've studied American rootwork and conjure, which are similar in their styles, but not quite the same.
Oh, you studied hoodoo? Huh.
Yes.
See, I always figured you would study voodoo, but you're studying the light part. That's
Voodoo is, well, I've studied some of the magical aspects of voodoo, but the problem with voodoo is it's a magical religion primarily. So
okay.
yeah, I don't really go in for the religious aspects of magic systems. I just pick through whatever aspects of a given thing have magic involved in it. Like when I study Islam, I usually study Sihir because that's the variation of magic that's in Islam. And when I study Judaism, I tend to study like Kabbalah and talismanic magic because that's the part of Judaism that I find useful and shit.
So we have some stuff from Bat City. Stuff.
Aha.
Is
Hello, sir.
Anakin Skywalker a simp lord? Uh, yeah,
I I
maybe.
can't.
Legitimately, I want to puke because I see the word simp. That's pretty much how I'm feeling right now reading that.
Yeah,
It, it's a stupid term.
well, I mean, I get what it's for, because simp is so, I can't speak. Simp is short for simpering, so it kind of
Really?
indicate indicate
Huh.
what, and to people who forget that that's where the word comes from. Yes, simp is short for simpering, so it
Like
is referring to a person as being a simpering brat, basically.
I was legitimately wondering where the term simp came from for so
Yeah,
long. Are you feeling
sure.
that?
It's a takeoff of the word simpering.
Hmm. I honestly can't answer because I'm not entirely sure with Anakin.
Yeah,
I
I don't know
legitimately don't want to
know
cat.
where that came from. So
Yeah.
please tell us where you obtained this meme from,
Yeah.
and also probably.
Why does only a simp deal in absolutes? I don't understand. Then he says, "What about Mr. Clean? Does Mr. Clean's magic eraser is evil?" You might want to check some grammar, dude. Just saying. Uh,
I
is magic learned like a skill or born with like a talent? Ed asked.
It's a skill. There are people who have natural inclinations towards it, like any other talent, but it's a skill. Anyone can learn it. It's just a matter of taking the time. It's a bitch and a half to get good at it, but what isn't a bitch and a half to get good at when you apply
Case in
yourself?
point. Case in point, Dalton. When did you start originally learning magic?
Um, I started getting into magic after my theoretical physics phase when I was like 9 to 11. So around the age of 11 is when I started to study it. Um, practice wise, it probably took me about a year before I felt confident enough to start actually practicing shit. So yeah, about 14 years I've been at magic, 14 or 15 years now, which is the entirety of my adult life at the very least. And I'm still not entirely great at it. I'm getting better, but I there are still areas of magic that I'm weak at. Like, for example, for the past like 3 years, I've been doing a fuck ton of research on evocation and summoning, because evocation and summoning is one of those parts of magic that's a bitch and a half.
Let's see stuff. My grammar misspelled that. Uh, us s I can't read that. So the lineage of witches is BS for the most part. Ed asked.
Yes, for the most part, anyone who says that they are like from a line of witches, um, just tell them that doesn't mean that a person just starting out can't be one. Is the thing. Again, if you have a family legacy of it, you're probably going to have more of a natural inclination towards it. But there are really stupid people who believe that you can only be a witch if you are from a legacy of witches, and that's just such bullshit. I could cry if I wasn't more likely to burst the blood vessel in anger. There,
Okay, is the Mr. Clean magic eraser really real magic?
no,
Maybe.
no, no, and I'm actually almost offended that you would even make that joke, but it was a joke, so I'm going to allow it. Plus, I don't get offended by things. I get pissed, but I don't get offended.
All right. Shall we continue?
We shall.
All right. It would be hard to remove or update the Vistanti as presented without completely rewriting the entire Curse of Strahd campaign. This is a problem that permeates much of Dungeons and Dragons. Stereotypes, regressive ideas about race, and thoughtless caricatures are baked into the setting. Again, the setting is more up to the DM themselves. Like, I think a lot of DMs, like more experienced ones, obviously, construct entire worlds themselves with
Agreed.
using bases from like starter kits and stuff.
And once again, the people who created Dungeons and Dragons were nerds of the mathematical and literature variety. So when they made D&D, they made D&D as a reference to old and in particular medieval literature. When they incorporated those kind of stereotypes into D&D, it was specifically because they knew that for the most part those were not true, and to make fun of them. So essentially what you've done there is very much like a person who can never understand a joke because they don't understand the context of the joke. You've pointed at the thing that is the joke, and you've gone, well, how is that supposed to be funny? The in short, that's the joke, you idiots. The joke is the stereotype, and playing into the sort of medieval classical world of the stereotype. Every European is a knight. Every Asian person is a monk or a martial artist. Every person who hunts must have some weird mystical knowledge of nature that nobody else has. That's where the ranger class comes from, and on and on and on we go. From wizards to druids to fighters to basically any kind you can imagine. Playing into the stereotypes is part of the joke. And it's funny because it's funny and worthwhile in the setting because everyone knows it's an oversimplification. Everyone knows it's supposed to be an homage to literature and not a one-to-one reference to reality. You've taken the joke and you've dismantled it because you don't understand why it's supposed to be funny. And now you wonder why everyone's getting mad at you for being essentially wet blankets.
Yep.
Oh, God damn it.
So Bad City stuff asks, would you be down to see a live action movie, a live action more mature Hex Girls movie or miniseries? Thorn, Dusk, and Luna, or Eco Goths that play in the rock band. Thorn is the only one of them but has powers.
I appreciate the Scooby-Doo reference because I, like a lot of kids in the late 90s and early 2000s, grew up on those movies. But I don't know where I'm not sure where that came from, that idea. Generally speaking, if we're going to have a Hex Girls movie, I'd like to do away with this whole blood legacy is the only way to obtain power bullshit. Besides the context of Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghost is really, really stupid because they refer to what should have been called village wise women as Wiccans, and Wicca is something that only dates back to the late 19th and early 20th century with a guy by the name of Gerald Gardner, who essentially took old school British folk magic in the form of what was referred to as cunning craft or cunning man's work, and blended it with sort of the last vestiges of paganism to essentially create his own religion from scratch. And he mostly did it because he was a male feminist who wanted to see quote unquote empowered priests and priestesses naked. He was just looking for a magical excuse for an orgy. I know Wicca is definitely more valid now because of the actual work that's gone into combining it with older traditions, but yeah. Wicca is not ancient. Wicca is very, very new. It has elements of shit that's older, but it in and of itself is not old. Therefore, calling Thorne's ancestors Wiccans in the context of Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghost is really, really dumb.
Ed Brewery, you think that, but there is so much outrage over racist orcs and such. Yeah, we covered that, didn't we? Like earlier the year.
We did. We did.
Ironically, there are a lot of dudes who would love to bang an orc girl.
Or an orc guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like okay, as an example, again, in the D&D game I mentioned earlier that I was playing with Corrupt, where he was an orcish slave trader, I bought an orc as a sex slave and or bodyguard.
Of course you did.
I'm not even kidding. We used a thing in the Pathfinder sort of expanded canon called the Book of Erotic Fantasy to turn this orc into essentially a love slave. And it was amazing.
What was your alignment? I'm just curious.
What my alignment always is, lawful neutral.
Huh. Pretty sure I'd just be neutral, but whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway,
you probably would be. I need to send you a personality test that it's a really thorough personality test, but it will give you your race, your class, your stat scores, and I think and your alignment based on your personality.
right. All right. So moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
All right, where Wizard of the Coast appears to be trying to change things, but it keeps stumbling, and it's often the fans who pick up the pieces. Reddit and other online forums contain dozens of revisions of the Visanti and the half-orc race, and they revise the concept of race and ancestry in D&D entirely. Again, I think that's just a case-by-case scenario when it comes to creating your own campaigns, and not really an overall thing.
Yeah, and also, once again, why are you only paying attention to the people who complain about this shit? Why do you not attempt to defend yourself or counter argue? Why don't you listen to the people who are like, no, actually, I'd like D&D if you could please put it back the way it was during 3.5. Which, by the way, a lot of people seem to have really liked D&D 3.5. Because I've heard a lot of things about 5th edition and 4, and the only things I keep hearing from a lot of my friends who play D&D is how great 3.5 was and how shit 5th edition is.
Okay, so Batsy stuff. I'm asking if you'd be interested in watching a live action movie or miniseries of the Hex Girls if it was factually correct and changed the backstory behind Thorne's origins to make her a witch.
I mean, yes, but let's be entirely honest here. A live action version of the Hex Girls would probably just be The Craft again. Because that's kind of what the Hex Girls are, is the girls from The Craft if they became band members and were in an animated setting.
I legitimately would like to see a spinoff with them.
Yeah, I know the Hex Girls. The Hex Girls were awesome, and I'm kind of glad that they got the big following that they did.
Yeah. I will say, and like, I don't know if you're like, you can curse at me all you want, Don, but because it is kind of my favorite rendition of Scooby Doo,
Mm-hmm.
Mystery Incorporated. I liked that it did a lot of character work. You know me. Come on.
Yes, yes, okay. It did. Yes, fair. Brainstormer gets obsessed with character. Everyone take a drink.
Yeah. But I like the rendition they did of the Hex Girls. Like it's similar to a lot of the times with the Hex Girls. Like obviously, they hmm, they didn't show up a lot, but when they did, they kind of just took the show.
Yeah. I've always been a big fan of Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island and Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghost. I actually am one of the few people who likes Witch's Ghost a little bit better than on Zombie Island. Um, I also like that whoever was in charge of writing for the scene where Thorn makes up her little quasi potion of peppermint and cloves to soothe her vocal cords, they actually did their research because I've used basically that recipe before and it works.
Hmm.
It's actually really good for cleaning out your sinuses in general. Um,
Neat.
yeah. Which funnily enough, they probably could if they wanted to spin that as Thorn's ancient wise woman ancestry coming through. The fact that she figured that out.
Hmm.
Though it sort of bothers me that the Hex Scroll stopped at being eco goth instead of actually being some variation on like pagan.
Hmm.
Or generally speaking, I'd like to see more actual occultist representation if we're supposed to care about representation at all. But yeah, some variation there. They could have easily just become regular practicing like pagans or Wiccans or whatever, and it would have been fine.
Yeah. I also want to say like those older Scooby Doo movies uh had a lot of effort put in them.
So much effort. I know. Yeah.
Just don't see it these days. Anyway, moving forward.
Hmm.
Ancestry and Culture, an alternative to race in fifth edition, is a 70-page book of alternative rules written by D&D players that's meant to pull the game away from racial existentialism.
Oh, fuck's sake.
No, not existentialism. Assistant
Essentialism.
essentialism. Thank you.
Okay. Um, no one is saying the race is the entirety of a person's character. Even in D, no version of D&D, in no version of D&D was the race the entirety of a person's character. What we are saying is that genetic predisposition or de-emphasization does matter. The skills that you have genetically do make a difference. Like for example, if you're 7 feet tall and built like a linebacker, you're going to be more predisposed to athletics. And someone like me, with my weird, abnormal brain and my physical disability, are more predisposed towards academic pursuits. And that's just fine because that was the way the dice rolled. Sometimes in D&D that's quite literal. But that doesn't mean that you couldn't have one or more of these things be more complicated. It just means that you have a predisposition, a inclination towards a set of skills or a disinclination towards a set of skills. If if you're um if you're an Asian woman, you probably shouldn't try to become a power lifter. Or if you're um or if you've recently suffered head trauma or you didn't have a father growing up, you probably shouldn't be super discouraged with yourself when you end up being academically disinclined because studies have shown having a parent in your life is a is a high is a high indicator of eventual intelligence. And obviously, suffering head trauma will make you intellectually disinclined because that's just how that works. moving on.
All right. Shit. Thank God for a phone case. Okay. Where? All right. Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. WTC's new book that launches with alternatives to using race opens with a page and a half that outlines new rules for using races. The new supplemental rules in Tasha's are nice in that they encourage more player choice and freedom in the character creation process. However, players and DMs have been encouraged to change rules as they see fit for a long time in D&D publications. It's the nature of the game.
And therein lies the stupid. Anyone who had a problem with these things probably could just change them. And it didn't require Wizard of the Coast to come out and morally flagellate themselves with a whip made of groupthink.
Sorry, I was a couple comments popped up. Ed Brewer says, I can't tell what kind of hat that is. It's not a fedora, is it?
No, it is a topper. Here. Let me see if I can show it up in the... Well, if I can actually...
Bat City stuff. I would get Grant Morrison to write the script for the live-action Hex Girls, and I would have David S. Sandberg direct it.
I'm blanking on what Sandberg did.
Shazam.
I wouldn't go with... Who would I want to do a live-action Hex Girls is a good goddamn question. I think Chad Stahelski.
Fuck, I'm blanking that name. God damn it.
John Wick.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because he knows how to use color, and he's good at balancing like action and humor and shit.
I don't know. I think Sandberg or James Wan, says Bat City.
That might lean a little bit too heavily into actual horror, and Scooby-Doo has kind of always existed in the horror comedy space. Probably wouldn't be a bad idea to pick Michael Dougherty, but I didn't want to say Michael Dougherty first off because I'm always extolling the virtues of how awesome Michael Dougherty is, especially in regards to horror comedy.
Well, I also think a genuineness with like the personal story, which you kind of have to with these kind of characters.
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna say Sam Raimi because horror comedy. He's kind of the grandfather of that.
Kind of, yeah.
So I'd say he'd be like my third choice. Sandberg would probably be my second. I'm not sure who my first would be, honestly. Also, Ed Brewer says very Quaker about your hat.
It's really, really not. But thank you.
I've met Mormons. Never met a Quaker.
I've never met a Quaker either. The only Quaker that I know of readily is Benjamin Franklin, because Benjamin Franklin's awesome. But yeah, it's a top hat.
For the record, Mormons are weird as shit. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, yeah. Much like any more fundamentalist strain of Christianity or any religion. Fundamentalism is just weird, folks. It's just weird. No matter what religion you're talking about, fundamentalism is fucking weird.
It's weird when they appear in the middle of the fucking night knocking on your door wanting to talk.
Yes. Would you like to hear the good word? No. The answer is no. Goodbye.
I said yes, but that was because I was like 13 at the time. I didn't know until after how fucking weird they could be. Nice guys.
But at least they're not those people who... At least they're not those people who on a random street corner or in the middle of a quad would just show up and start ranting and raving about how everyone and everything's going to hell because reasons.
Those end of the world type preacher bullshit jackasses.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was a weird tangent, but
yeah.
Moving on. Quan says, while players are now explicitly encouraged to swap ability score bonuses and languages in Tasha's, this really doesn't address the root problem. It's
well, for most people, the root problem is being able to play the freaking game and have fun. So I think it does.
Yeah, Don, what's the word again? You know,
essentialism.
Essentialism. Thank you. In how D&D races are portrayed, they simply tell players and DMs to ignore the problems without actually solving them.
Again, there's nothing essentialist about races in D&D. They're just acknowledging that race is a factor, a variable.
And again,
one variable among about 1,000 different variables.
Right. And again, that really is up to the DM and players whether or not they want to have that in the story.
Yeah. It's actually one of the most awesome things about D&D that they do allow for those kind of variables, because that's not a variable I think a lot of people would consider. But because somebody in ye olden times considered it, it adds another layer of awesome shit to D&D, whether you want to play as a troll, a dwarf, a orc, a drow, an elf, or just vanilla human.
Dragonborn? No, those dragon.
There is something similar to a dragonborn. I forget what the fuck it's called.
Those dragon people, like.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a bunch of different races, and they all have different skills and different,
Yeah.
And what's more, and this is how you know this whole it's racist thing is bullshit. There is no race that's better than all the other races.
They're all kind of
because that would be extremely stupid. What happens is every race has some things they're good at and some things they're not good at. Some things they're predisposed to genetically, and some things they're disinclined to genetically. Like life.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean it's the only variable. It just means it's one among many. And there are so many goddamn variables in D&D. Moving on.
Yep. All right. The view from inside the company isn't great either. I did some limited work for Wizard of the Coast on a project under the vast D&D umbrella in very early 2020. I cannot talk about the project directly or my experience in depth because of a strict NDA, non-disclosure agreement. What I will say is that in my limited experience working with the company, my manager on that project fought for my ideas and listened to my critiques, and in fact wanted to work with me because of my prior criticisms of the company and its products. Austin Walker says Walker is the host of Waypoint Radio and Friends at the Table, a podcast where he plays tabletop role-playing games and discusses world building with his friends.
Okay, so what does that mean?
Okay, there's more here. Legacy issues with D&D as a franchise and Wizard of the Coast as a company presented innate roadblocks towards addressing these problems, and I was often frustrated as I saw the limits of reforming the franchise's relationship with race. Because of this, I do not choose to work with the company again in the near future. Not entirely sure, honestly.
Yeah, I don't want to invalidate your experience, sir, but it seems like you complained about irrelevant racial bullshit, and your manager was trying his darndest to help you anyway, which implies at the very least that the people Wizards of the Coast hired are not in any way attached to racism as an idea. but he passed it to his higher ups, and a lot of your ideas were confusing or just nonsensical, so they probably went, "What the fuck is this?" And even if at that time they said, "What the fuck is this?" clearly they don't have a racial problem because they were willing to make at least some of the changes. Your definition of half measures is in fact some people's definition of going way too the fuck far, which suggests to me that you are hyper focused on race when race is not an issue. And that is the very definition of racism. When you focus on race when race is not an issue, or ascribe to race more importance than it should be ascribed, you are being racist. Flat out.
All right. Okay. According to Walker, racial essentialism is built into D&D's DNA, and its recent push for racial reckoning is a long time coming. Inside the space of nerd hobbies, D&D's mainstreamification has come late. Walker says, "Yeah, mainstreamification or mainstreaming is not great. Honestly, it's not a great thing."
No. And to clarify, that doesn't mean that there's anyone who isn't welcome to be in nerd culture.
Yeah. And I think you and I had a brief conversation on this about a week ago about mainstreaming itself, which is it kind of waters down things for a quote unquote general audience.
Yeah, it lowers the bar. And again, the bar has nothing to do with exclusion. It had everything to do with demonstration of knowledge, passion, skills, and abilities.
Yeah.
That's the only thing anyone in geek cultures has ever cared the fuck about. You want to know why? Because geek culture was always on the margins of civilization.
Right.
It always was a weird niche that most people didn't get. So a lot of the time, the kinds of people who were drawn to geek shit were outcasts, either because they liked geek shit or because of some other shit, and then were thrown into geek shit sort of secondarily. But either way, geek shit has always had this sort of big tent effect that they have. But because of the nature of geekdom itself, it was kind of exclusionary in the sense of you need to have passion, you need to have skills, you need to have knowledge, and you need to have abilities. As long as you have those, you're fine. If not, then fuck you. But now, because the stigma of being a geek is gone, a lot of people who wouldn't actually like geek stuff otherwise are coming into geek culture, finding it's not to their liking and deciding, well, it's not to my liking, so I'm going to change it. Meanwhile, the actual geeks, i.e. the ones who would like it even if everyone else in the world told them to go fuck themselves, are sat there going, this is very important to us, can you please not fuck with it? They don't, because the problem with the mainstreamification of geek culture is, I'm gonna be a little bit controversial here. The surface level of geekdom became popular because everyone realized that geeks had an actual point, i.e., a long time ago when we talked about comics and D&D and shit like that, everyone told us, you guys are creeps, you guys are losers, you guys are fags, you guys are, whatever, for liking this stuff. You should, go off in a corner and die, basically.
What the fuck did you go through, man?
It's not something I went through in particular. It's just, general. That was kind of the approach to geekdom in the old days. But yeah. But nerds and geeks said, no, you guys, this stuff is really cool. Give us a little while, we'll show you. And because the stuff was cool, eventually, it was successful. But the surface level of geek stuff didn't apparently export geek geek values, as it were. It didn't export the drive to make your case, to make the point that this stuff is worthy on its own. And so what you have is people basically doing to geek culture what a lot of people also do with science now, which is the superficial,
We love the science.
yes, superficial, we love the science thing, but not actually understanding a fucking thing about science.
Dalton, it's not love, it's WUV. The
Yes.
WUV.
Yeah, well, fuck you. I'm not debasing myself enough to use that inflection.
All right, just
But
be accurate.
but yeah, it's that approach, but for geek stuff.
Right.
People will say they like shit like Funko Pops or T-shirts or what have you with geek stuff on it, or they'll like the Marvel movies and they think that makes them an expert in the Marvel comics, but they won't have any of the drive or any of the inclination to actually learn, engage,
Right. No,
yeah,
finish your thing.
yeah, to learn or engage or develop an actual passion for these things. They know that these things are popular, but they don't actually have any understanding of why or how these things are popular. They just know that it is. Therefore, they jump on the bandwagon.
Yep. Yeah, like 20 years ago. Well, when I was growing up in the early 2000s, even though like Spider-Man was a thing and stuff, I got made fun of by kids in my kindergarten class because I liked superheroes or I liked drawing them and all. I mean, like it wasn't a bunch of people, like just a few assholes, mainly because we had kind of an adversarial relationship between. So I think it was mainly just me
Right.
being problem against. But
But still, when they went looking for things to make fun of you for, they thought it was a valid thing to make fun of you for, like, actually legitimately liking superheroes instead of just kind of having a surface level relationship with them.
yeah, I think I brought this up a few other times when we talked about this kind of similar thing, which is like 10, 20 years ago, there were assholes mocking us for liking this stuff, genuinely liking it. And now they like it, but again, like it is just surface level. Um, and I think again, like that's what that's what a lot of people like with the D&D thing is they're trying to do. They're just trying to change the surface level thing without actually understanding the core root concept that makes D&D as loved as it is.
Yeah. They don't like or they don't understand well enough to like the actual essence of the thing. So they think they can just change shit willy-nilly. And when the uh, nerds and geeks who have been through the metal testing point out that no, if you do that, you will change the thing in such a way that it will damage it, they lose their fucking minds because they don't understand why they it's to borrow a phrase from Jeff Goldblum's character Dr. Ian Malcolm from Jurassic Park. You got so carried away with whether or not you could, you didn't stop to think whether you should.
Yeah. Shall we continue?
We shall.
Okay. Comic books are the basis for the biggest movie franchises in the world. Video games are a billion-dollar industry. Fantasy fiction like Game of Thrones dominates television. That last one is.
Well, it did.
Yeah, it did. And 2 years ago, it fucking burned and died a horrible, painful death.
Oh, Game of Thrones, we hardly knew ye.
Yeah. But video games it's a slippery slope, honestly. I think.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I'd say like the last decade, it's kind of been up and down in quality, mainly down. I mean, like there have been like a few spikes of good things, but mostly they're overshadowed by like all the other shit.
Yeah, unfortunately, the social justice mob got to video games before they got to D&D, so that battle is quite a storied one at this point.
Yep.
Um,
Okay, but continuing on. But tabletop role playing games didn't enter the mainstream until a few years ago. Stranger Things aired in 2016, and Critical Role, web show where voice actors play D&D, began in 2015. These two shows, more than anything else, catapulted D&D into the mainstream.
you can fuck right off. I don't think
I think
I
they,
don't.
um, I don't know. Like, I think Critical Role is kind of in that niche market. While it is more mainstream, kind of, it's not as well known
It,
as I think they're implying.
yeah, it's still very much in it's to use a phrase that sometimes comes up. It's very inside baseball, as it were.
Yeah.
Um,
But no, I'd honestly say like when the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon that came out, what like 80s?
yeah, and the live action movie was what in the 90s.
Yeah, and plus there have been like a few short films and series based around D&D.
Yeah, and
I wouldn't
there
say
were
like Dungeons and
yeah
Dragons.
there were also a bunch of direct to video sequels to the Dungeons and Dragons movie.
Yeah. So, and again, like a lot of stuff has been influenced by D&D and like references and stuff, but I don't think D&D again like in the last decade, I think it's really become more prominent.
I think it's just a matter of geek stuff travels together. I think there's a lot of overlap between people that like comics and also like D&D, or people that like sci-fi and also like D&D, or
Yeah,
people that like
yeah.
fantasy and
I
also
mean
like
I mean
D&D.
more in mainstream terms.
So inevitably, when geek culture kind of became the dominant subculture there for a hot minute before the social justice infiltration of such things, um, it was inevitable that eventually somebody was going to go, oh, hey, also, while we're in here bringing light to things that are awesome, you guys who haven't checked out D&D really should check out D&D. And, the culture just kind of went, yeah, we should. And as per usual, the geek culture got to say, I told you so to the non geek culture again, because we've been saying this was cool all along, but y'all just didn't want to hear it. God damn you.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
It still held on to a lot of baggage from its past when it broke big. Again, like I think you're kind of conflating your point.
Yeah. What are you? Yeah. The question becomes, what do you define as baggage, and why do you define it as baggage?
Right. Not,
Because I think to a lot of people, this is a non-issue. This is a non-point. Most the the problem is you are looking at this through a particular framework, and you assume that that framework is how everyone sees it. But most people don't even know about your framework, and even if they did, would reject your framework on the basis of it being stupid.
mm-hmm.
Case in point, I know about your framework, but I'm rejecting it because it's fucking stupid.
Yeah.
Much like Nick Fury, I must say, I respect that you have a plan, but given that it's a stupid ass plan, I elect to ignore it.
I think you're paraphrasing, but
I am paraphrasing, but yes. Given that your framework is a stupid ass framework, I have elected to call it stupid and to occasionally laugh at you for being stupid.
mm-hmm. Okay. Wizards of the Coast is trying to make changes, but it often feels like lip service. It probably is.
Well, I don't know about that
Okay.
because
50.
unfortunately these kinds of industries, the arts in particular, are filled to the rafters with people who have basically been inculcated with Frankfurt School mentality, which basically leads into social justice and intersectional feminism and all this shit. So,
I'd say, okay, I'd say 50-50.
unfortunately,
How about 50-50 then?
yeah, it's probably something on. Well, it's probably more along the lines of they don't know how far to take it, because
True.
they probably want to make as few changes as possible so that people who aren't social justice obsessed can at least enjoy it still. But you know, they've given an inch, and so now the social justice mob is going to come to their door with pitchforks and torches with, here's another 1,001 things to change in your next update.
You know what's always funny? Like when someone brings out that comparison of a mob, which pitchfork and torches.
Mm-hmm.
I say, why not grab a shotgun?
Don't give them ideas. But then again, most of the social justice mob would probably be against gun control, or would probably be against guns. So
Obviously, I mean, like you're dealing with like I'm picturing like the old, like the village folk from Frankenstein when they got into like a mob.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'd say we're the intellectual modern day person. Shotgun, fire it in the air, scare those bitches off.
Yeah, which I think in this instance might make us both Ash Williams. Listen up, you primitive screwheads. This is my boomstick.
I call it. This is. Actually, I don't know what I call it. Boomstick's a good name, but if we're talking how to handle arguments, I'll think of it later. It'll come to me.
Mm-hmm.
Walker read the list of proposed changes and said to himself, all of these are probably the right decisions, and also, I don't think any of this is proactive or deep enough to address core fundamental problems and expectations, he said. It's a difficult problem. I get it. I don't think you can bodlerize? Bodlerize?
I don't know.
Bowdlerize.
Yeah, I have no idea. Kudos to you, writer of this article, for using a word that even I don't know.
Is the interviewer, I think. Hold on. Looking it up.
Okay, to the dictionary for this point of reference.
One sec. Oh, I wrote something in private chat.
Yeah, I saw.
Okay.
And yeah, we can.
All right. All right. Remove material that is considered improper or offensive from text or account, especially when the result that the text becomes weaker or less effective. Synonyms are censor, cut, edit, redact, purge, purify, sanitize, emasculate.
Okay, well, that's exact. But the problem that I'm having here is that is based on that definition. That is exactly what you are doing. You just don't want to admit that that's what you're doing,
Yeah.
either to us or to yourself, or most likely both.
Mm-hmm. What was already there, and say we're going to drop the slurs. We're going to make the yellow face a little less yellow. Okay, we'll talk to the Simpsons about that. I don't think you can remaster away racism. I think that's a really difficult prospect, but it's one that they should take head on.
Okay, this is again my issue. You're assuming that there is already racism to be addressed, and that makes no fucking sense.
Right. I also want to point out is that if you if you refuse to address something like racism, even in like a fictional story, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
then you aren't allowing people to tackle the subject matter in a way that's befitting for that person.
Yeah.
It's similar to like how like Dawn and I have talked about like the education system of America and kind of how much it's shit.
Yes,
Uh,
so very much.
especially like with social studies or history class, because I barely remember anything from my history class at
Yeah,
all. But that's because like they never really grabbed our attention because they didn't really address anything that was that shit that really happened or that
yeah.
really mattered, honestly.
They were just spinning the narrative. Here is the thing you're supposed to believe.
Right. Like obviously I'm not stupid. I know racism, segregation, slavery, that shit's bad. Like how downright. Like that's just common human sense.
Yeah. If you're a human being, then you have human rights and of
But
basically.
the fact that you're trying to omit something from a story in a place where shit like this kind of happened is
Yeah.
kind of stupid. I'm not talking about like historic realism or anything of this, obviously.
Right.
I'm more just talking like it's interesting and it's a way to learn.
Yeah, if you don't let us talk about it in this context, where are we supposed to talk about it?
Yeah.
And what's more, if you make fun of something, you inherently take power away from that thing. If
Mm-hmm.
you put it in a context where whatever aspect of it that's harmful can't be harmful anymore, you inherently take power away from that thing. Like, for example, Brainstormer and I like making demographic based jokes to each other. He when he gets exasperated with me throws crippled in there for no reason, and I occasionally refer to him as a mixed race mutt. We don't
He also
mean
is
any.
racist when I ever like eat something that is Mexican.
Yes, whenever Brainstormer actually does eat something that's stereotypically Hispanic, I chuckle and he hollers racist. Um, there is no malice whatsoever in any of that shit. None. It's us having A, self awareness, B, the ability to laugh at ourselves, and C, knowing our friends well enough to know that they also can be in on the joke. Because having inside jokes is one of the things that makes friends closer.
Yep.
And essentially, shit like D&D is one big let's all have an inside joke. Let's all make fun of the um, simplistic, myopic way um, archetypes tend to make people look.
Not to mention that again, and this is coming from me as a writer myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you know this, Don, but there are like channels that do like D&D stories. Like it's like creepypastas, but for D&D stories.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Um, it's where like they get stories of like campaigns and like characters and stuff, like certain events that happen in those certain campaigns,
Mm-hmm.
and they're very interesting simply because of like the player choice. And like
Mm-hmm.
that's another thing about D&D is that good and evil are kind of like from what you said earlier, like they are measured things in D&D, obviously,
Yeah,
but
they're facts of the matter. It's not. There is no moral ambiguity in Dungeons and Dragons. There's just.
well, I mean that it does come.
Well, I mean, there is in the sense that you can choose not to pick a side, but if you decide to go evil, there's a specific kind of behavior you're supposed to exhibit. And
Right,
if
right.
you're supposed and if you're good, there's a specific kind of behavior you're supposed to exhibit to be in line with that. They aren't that I'm saying is in the universe of D&D, good and evil are forces rather than, and I can't believe I'm using this phrase, but social constructs.
Huh. Hmm. But
Mhm.
yeah, and again, like the whole thing about D&D is it's player choice and a lot of math, which is kind of what I think is kind of turned me a little bit off to D&D because I was never good at math.
You don't really have to be good at like math per se. You just have to keep track of like stats, like
Oh, that should
different
actually be easier then.
different numbers. Like you'll like there are various different numbers you have to either add or subtract from your role based on what skills your character has taken or what abilities you've chosen or what spells you might have picked that day. Like a lot of times with like a spell, it'll say your your intelligence or your charisma modifier, which is basically what your score translates into in terms of um, when it comes time to roll your dice. Like let's say your charisma score was or your charisma stat was 15. That would give you, I believe, a +1 to charisma. So whenever anything requiring a charisma save or a charisma bonus would come up, you'd roll your dice, and then whatever the dice said, you'd add 1, because your charisma bonus was +1, or your intelligence bonus or whatever. Whereas if you have a neutral or negative charisma modifier, you either don't add anything or you can even subtract. So let's say you had a negative charisma modifier and you had a charisma save you had to do. Well, then you'd roll your dice and then you subtract whatever the number was from your dice roll.
Right.
It's a little bit more complicated than that, but that's basically the long and the short of it. It's
complicated than what you just said.
a little
Really?
bit because there's different saves for different shit. Like
Well, I get that. Like, no, I understand that. Like, look, I've watched Critical Role a few times. I've seen how it works. I'd have to look more into how to actually do it myself, but
yeah.
I get the
And
gist.
sometimes you have to stack modifiers. Like sometimes something is both charisma and intelligence, so you'd have to
Right.
add
Yeah. No,
whatever your
that makes
modifiers to those would be. Yeah.
that makes sense. Um, I will say this might be our first article of the year where we might have to save the rest of it for next week.
Mm. Let's see how far we can get before too long, and
All right.
if we have to.
Well, we've already spent 2 hours on this, so
True.
yeah. Okay. But also it's hard to do that because you need people on the team who are as diverse as the world you want to represent. Oh, fuck you!
No.
No, you do not. Okay. So Dalton can attest to this, right?
Okay.
I realize this isn't exactly connected to D&D, but the fantasy series I'm working on, which could no, I guess it kind of does because I told you once that I thought of it being like a D&D campaign, like that world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and fuck, I'm losing my train of thought here. But you do not need a room of writers that are each a different, diverse voice to create something.
Yeah.
Because I mean,
What you need is someone who understands human nature and logic.
mm,
If you have somebody who understands those things,
oh,
then
also,
one person can write any race, any gender you like.
yeah, I also forgot Creative Spark. Hello?
Brainstorm?
Oh,
You're cutting
hello.
out a little bit. Yes.
Am I back?
Okay, now I can hear you.
All right. A Creative Spark. You also need a Creative Spark.
Mm-hmm.
Along with the other things Donna mentioned. But yeah, and again, like that is kind of something that we've touched upon, which is the merit of the people that are creating these things, which is something that's kind of fallen to the wayside in recent years. Um, uh, actually, no, but no, you don't need a team that is as diverse as the world you want to represent. No, you don't.
By that logic, you need to summon an elf every time you want to make an elf character.
I don't think the Fae would appreciate that.
No, they wouldn't. You would be hunted down and skinned by the wild hunt before the third summoning had gone off.
Legitimately, I would like to have them as a consultant, maybe for a book or something or a series at one point, but not like constantly summoning them. You know?
Like it would be interesting, and I sometimes wonder if creatives ever do think of actually doing research, like if a character they're writing is based on a figure from like mythology or from like the Grimoire tradition, if they ever do think, gee, I wonder how I should write this character, I'll summon them and ask. Because funnily enough, I have a friend who works apparently pretty closely with Queen Mab, and that friend of mine is also a really big fan of the Dresden Files, and we've had many conversations because I'm also a really big fan of the Dresden Files about how first I asked him if the IRL Queen Mab knew about her portrayal in the Dresden Files, and after he confirmed that she did, I asked what she thought of her portrayal in the Dresden Files. Um, what she apparently said was her portrayal in the Dresden Files is actually a little bit too soft, but that's a story for another day. But
Oh
yeah,
boy.
yeah. In this context, um, first of all, one of the implications of what you're saying suggests you could never make something that didn't exist in reality, which is stupid. But also, it implies that if there is a real world equivalent to anything you're talking about, you have to immediately um, figure out how to contact them and ask. Which, if you ever write historical fiction, does that mean you have to get out a Ouija board and start summoning ghosts? Because, like, I'm an occultist, so I have no problem believing that elves and fairies and all this shit exists. But I am just saying that from a practical standpoint, you're gonna piss somebody off eventually. Like you can try to conjure elves every time you need to write an elf character in D&D if you like, but you do know what happens to people who piss off fairies is not pretty.
Mm. Okay, so
Mention
next part.
if you ever focus on anything that's
Hey,
sorry, go ahead.
Dalton. No, it's just
Yeah,
you were cutting out.
son of a bitch.
You want to try leaving and then
I'm
come back
gonna
in?
yeah, I'm gonna pop out and pop back in to see if that.
Give it a second, folks.
Okay, I'm back.
Yes, you are.
Okay.
Uh, yeah. So next part of the article is no more evil races. I mean, to be fair, you can pick any race and have them be self-indulgent or noble. Really, just again, it's more player
Yeah.
choice than anything.
And again, it's supposed to be kind of a reference to evolution. If your race grows up in a place that is harsh, you might be naturally predisposed to shit like aggression and hedonism and violence.
I
And if
am
you're naturally predisposed to aggression and hedonism and violence, then in D&D terms, you would be more likely to be evil because again, in D&D, evil is quantifiable and good is quantifiable,
mhm,
which is very much different from reality in general, but whatever.
yeah. Which oh right. I'm more surprised that we haven't found any articles on Warhammer. Like I am
I honestly haven't looked. Warhammer's not my area.
well fair, it's not also mine. I mean like I mean really the only thing is the text to speech. Like what if the Emperor had a text to speech device? Which
Yeah.
is amazing by the way. Like totally
Yeah.
everyone should check that out.
For anyone that does want kind of anti-SJW coverage on Warhammer, highly recommend Art Warhammer. He's amazing, and apparently he's such a pain in the establishment of Warhammer's ass that they've actually created articles disparaging him. Which honestly, in a culture that's dominated by social justice, that's how you know someone does a good job when they get hit pieces written about them.
Okay.
Like if
Other
you're
people
pissing off the orthodoxy, then
oh no, I
go
thought
ahead.
you were done. Okay.
No, go
We're
ahead.
moving on. Okay. Other people of color have come away from working with Wizard of the Coast with a bad taste in their mouth. Orion Black, great name,
Yeah.
was a freelancer who worked on contract for Wizard of the Coast from November 2019 until the summer of 2020. Like Walker, Black had a bad experience. Contractors at Wizard of the Coast are generally renewed in blocks. Even though they'd work on summer projects, they knew toward the end of the summer that they weren't coming back. In a June meeting, Black says they watched someone else pitch a project they had created. It was the most infuriating thing. Okay, well, that's a valid thing to be angry at.
Yeah. Wit and race has bumfuck nothing to do with it.
Well,
If
let's just
somebody yeah, if somebody else um if somebody else pitches an idea that you come up with and your original concept was rejected but theirs gets accepted, that's some bullshit, regardless of the reasoning why.
okay. Well, it might turn into uh, they might turn into a race thing, but yeah, no, that's a shitty thing. Obviously, I'm not
Yeah.
denying that. But I'm not
I,
seeing
I-
them.
I'm just saying that's not the only reason why it's shitty.
Yeah,
Regardless of whatever stupid justification someone might come up with, whether it's race or not.
no, on merit, it is a shitty thing to do by itself.
Yeah, it should not be done.
Yeah,
That's some bullshit.
yeah. It was so surreal because of all the ideas that I came up with. I talked about extensively with other people. I had made documents. Jeremy Crawford, D&D's lead designer, starts talking about a new product they're coming out with, and it's almost word for word stuff from my email. Wow, that is that is just fucking grimy.
Yeah, that guy should be fired. Fuck the racial politics bullshit, but that guy should be fired just for skeevy, just for being skeevy.
Yeah, Jeremy Crawford, Jesus.
Have you no scruples and no shame?
Yeah. Okay, watching their idea get pitched in a meeting was devastating. That was one of the key things I was using to try and keep my job. Black says, the thing I thought was my ticket gets thrown back in my face as something that's very valuable to them and they want to move forward with it, but I get left behind and sent back to poverty. That
You
broke.
should sue. If you have any proof of this at all, you should sue.
Dude, that's I think that's pretty liable cause, honestly, to sue.
Yeah. You should find that email and pull it up and date and check the date on it, and then based on that, you should sue.
I mean, granted, this was in summer of 2020, so
But still, that's some bullshit, and it has nothing whatsoever to do with race.
yeah,
It has to do with the fact that that guy is apparently a skeevy bitch.
Jeremy Crawford. Why does his name
Yeah,
sound familiar?
I don't know, but at least in this instance, fuck you, Jeremy Crawford. I don't know enough about you or any other work you've done to say one way or the other, but at least in this instance, you are a sleazebag, and you need to give this person credit for their work.
Well, from what I read earlier, it says that he's a lead designer for D&D.
Regardless, you need to give people who work for you credit for their ideas.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay, Black had been toying with the idea of releasing a statement about their time at Wizard of the Coast, but didn't want to burn bridges. Oh, dude, they fucked you over first. You have justifiable cause.
Yeah, you are justified in suing their asses. Not for anything racist, but because that's just shameful business practices.
Yeah, okay. After the meeting, Black decided not to stay silent. They released a statement on July 4th, 2020, okay, detailing their unpleasant experience. Wizard of the Coast apologized in a tweet. You saving face bitches.
You give this person their job and possibly a promotion just for this bullshit.
Again, I'm not really seeing.
Yeah, I'm not seeing the race connection at all.
I'm just seeing like really shitty internal organization politics bullshit.
I think this has more to do with the little guy getting fucked over than it does a black guy getting fucked over. And I think, Mr. Orion Black, you are projecting your race into it when it's not an issue.
Or it could be the writer.
Yeah, which isn't or perhaps the writer just is, which either way is fucked. But yeah, whoever Orion Black happens to be, whether he's black or not, and I don't care either way. You, sir, were fucked over by people who had no just cause to fuck you over, and you should sue their asses on the grounds of intellectual property theft, basically. Because that's some bullshit. But what you definitely shouldn't do, whether you're doing it or not, is see it as a race issue. Because unfortunately, this kind of shit happens to everyone who happens to be an underling at a company if their boss is that much of a dick.
Okay, so he is black.
Yeah, and again, I don't care. And neither should he. Because again, this is a structure of the company and the boss being a dick issue. This is not a race issue.
Yeah.
Or at least I see no evidence whatsoever to suggest that it needs to be a race issue.
Okay.
Therefore, it probably shouldn't be one.
Mm-hmm. Moving on?
Yeah.
Okay. Black said they were often approached by leadership to make them make revisions to problematic content. Oh, okay.
Okay, so that was literally his job.
Okay, everybody would nod and say, that's cool, Black says, and leadership didn't write it down. That's how everything worked. It was very much, oh, that's nice, and they'd walk away. Yeah, I think there should be a lot of restructuring in Wizard of the Coast on their work ethic, because that doesn't sound
yeah. Number one, you shouldn't be hiring people to scan for problematic elements to begin with.
Right.
And number two, if you do, motherfucking utilize them.
Or better yet, just have them as editors, for fuck's sake.
Yeah. The position of editor already exists, so just make them an editor and be done with it.
Yeah. Okay. My worst example was the half-orcs, says Black. If you read the half-orc section from the Player's Handbook, it uses language that is nearly one-to-one with language specifically used against inbreeding between black people and people of color.
Okay. again, I defend Mr. Black's fact the fact that Mr. Black was obviously fucked over and would want to see him get his job back and also sue his boss's asses. But being that as it may, he is wrong to think that this is an issue.
Yep.
And again, I'm trying to be nice because this guy was genuinely fucked over, but there is no evidence that his being fucked over had anything whatsoever to do with race, other than the fact that he was basically given a diversity hire position, which is in and of itself kind of insulting, but clearly he wasn't insulted by that, so I'm just gonna leave it alone.
Yeah.
But that being said, and I know he was just trying to do the job that he was being paid to do, which is this bullshit diversity consultant thing. But that framework and anything that comes from that framework, unless it is very, very good, is bullshit. So, sorry. You can be in the moral and legal right and still be wrong on an artistic level. Yeah, moving on.
All right. Okay. One sec. So I don't. Okay. All right. So it sounds like I'm reading something about a black and white person from 1945. That's like the end quote there. Pretty stupid. Pretty much everything you said prior. So I'm not. I don't have anything new to say.
Yeah,
That.
it because when two races mix, any noticeable
It's like a Lager, you know, like
yeah, any outstanding qualities either of the two kinds have will naturally intermingle and become either emphasized or de-emphasized based on the nature of the pairing. It's basic genetics. We've understood this shit for thousands of years, as long as we've been breeding dogs and cats and every other fucking kind of animal and several plants.
yep.
Well, at least an intuitive understanding of it. We obviously haven't known much about genetics for very long, but we've had an intuitive understanding of breeding for freaking ever.
I saw a video where there was just like it was a mutt puppy, or a dog, mutt dog.
Aw.
Yeah. It was half German Shepherd, which was like its head, like it looked like a German Shepherd.
Aw.
Its body, which I believe he got from, the other half of it, was a corgi.
That's adorable.
No, I'm talking like a full-size German Shepherd head on the body of a corgi.
That is still adorable.
It was weird, but no, you're not wrong. Like, it was actually very adorable, but
it's very hard for dogs not to be at least a little bit adorable.
Yeah. All right, there. Okay, so here was the Okay, so player's handbook. Their human blood gives them an edge over their full-blooded orc rivals. The player's handbook says of the half orcs. Half orcs' greatest pigmentation, sloping foreheads, jutting jaws, prominent teeth, and towering builds make their orcish heritage plain for all to see. I mean, it's a monster mixed with like human blood. I'm pretty sure that any type of would be, any type of I don't want to say monster, but creature intermingling with a human, their monstrous traits are going to be more
noticeable,
prominent. I was going to say.
Yeah. Okay. Here's the funny thing, because the implication I think you're going with is that's racist because somehow it implies that humans are better than orcs. But here's the thing. Humans are, in D&D, one of the weakest, most bitch races in the entire game. That's one of the reasons why everyone plays characters that aren't human a lot of the time. Because humans are kind of shit. They don't get any of the extras. They don't get any of the they don't get any of the bonuses or any of the sub skills really. So as a result of humans kind of being the neutral, humans are just kind of considered neutral default. But the outcome of them being considered neutral default is them being kind of a blank slate that doesn't get any of the extras. Whereas, orcs are stronger, elves are prettier and they live longer. Dwarves are stronger and better with machines, yada yada yada. All the other races get all these gimmies basically, and humans are weak little shits. They're even technically a little bit weaker than goblins because goblins are tiny, but they're vicious motherfuckers. In the context of D&D, so they get all sorts of rage bonuses and claws and shit. So yeah, the outcome of this apparent superiority that humans have, or that you're implying that humans have in D&D, is that humans are weak pieces of shit who can't do shit, and all the other races get cool gimme shit. That's the irony. You're essentially saying the fact that humans don't get anything implies that they're better somehow. I'm that's very confused and confusing. If anything, humans should be subjugated by literally every other fucking species in the game. If we were actually playing this straight.
Ah, got my eye.
Moving on.
Yeah, I think after this one, we might have to call it quits for this article.
Yeah, this is one of those articles where the person likes to hear themselves talk. So
Been a while since I read one of those. So D&D is full of these stereotypes. As Walker said, the Monster Manual, Curse of Strahd, and Tomb of Annihilation, even in their revised forms, are full of thinly veiled racial stereotypes.
yes, that's the joke. That's the premise of the thing.
Alright, stereotypes are an act of creating category level knowledge based on our desires for simplicity and to differentiate individuals from different categories in our mind. I don't see how that's a bad thing.
It can obviously it can be a bad thing
Yeah,
if you
no,
apply if you
it can be. I'm not denying that. I just
yeah.
it's for a guy who has a lot of jumbled mess in his head, with ideas and stuff. Like Don can attest to this.
Yeah, he's basically a really good idea factory, folks. When we're just sitting here shooting the breeze off camera, we've spent hours just churning out good idea after good idea. And usually what happens is he comes up with a premise and I poke it a little bit and it turns into a full-blown series because for some reason that's just the way our creative process works.
Much to my dismay, now that I have I don't know 6 series because of you.
You'll thank me later when you're known as one of the biggest names in independent comic book publishing and have 5 different important sub series under your belt.
Yeah, but I mean compartmentalizing and having essentially somewhat of a mind palace is good to have for organizational purposes. Again, I understand. I like making lists for things because again, I get very it's like a tornado in my brain essentially when I try to keep things in my head.
Mm-hmm.
I always tend to write things down and stuff and keep them in tight, concise list as best I can.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's fine for D&D purposes. Obviously, I think you're again the writer of this article is projecting a bit. It's
yeah, and he's presupposing his own framework when most people don't abide by that framework.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, stereotypes, and Dalton said this before, is they have some truth to them.
Yeah.
And depending on the individual that uses or states such stereotypes, could have a malice or could have malice behind it. But in in re, in conjunction
Retrospect.
in conjunction with D&D, there's no malice. It's just again like it's just to keep things organized for the
Yeah,
player.
it's the mechanics of the world. And here's the thing. Stereotypes are our brain's shortcuts. Because the thing about our brains is our brains are greedy and inefficient little bastards. Which means even though your brain takes up like 40% of all the calories you ever intake as a human being, it hates wasting too much energy on one particular thing. So the brain makes a bunch of shortcuts. These shortcuts tend to take the form of simplifying very complex shit. Stereotyping is a term we get from printing, which basically means apply one typesetting to all of a given document or a given line of a document. It's basically the medieval or just after medieval equivalent to caps lock. The problem with stereotypes is if you get an instance outside of that norm, it becomes a problem. In D&D, this does not happen because if you want to play an atypical orc or an atypical elf or an atypical anything, you can. You just have to work it out with your DM. And no one is actually being harmed by this. Nobody. Not unless you actually are the kind of person who says black people can only play orcs. But as far as I am aware, nobody does that. Nobody. Nobody insists that you have to play a particular kind of person in game because of who you are out of game. Nobody. You can, but you don't have to. Moving on.
Yep. Okay. Guan says, however, these practices can distort perceptions and create biases regarding the real world counterparts to these fantasy creations. Wait, what? Let me reread that.
Okay, yes, please do.
Okay, well, let me reread the whole thing. Okay, so stereotypes are an act of creating category level knowledge based on our desires for simplicity and to differentiate individuals from different categories in our mind. Kwan says, however, these practices can distort perceptions and create biases regarding the real world counterparts of these fantasy creations. Where the fuck do you get these ideas from? You like that
Yeah,
makes
no.
no sense.
No. And again, I'm going to point this out. Black people exist independently of orcs in D&D. Asian people exist independently of elves in D&D. I'm trying to think of any other like mythical D&D races that you might conflate with um real world races in D&D. Okay.
Dwarfs.
Hmm?
Dwarfs are midgets or little people.
No, that would be halflings.
Okay.
I mean, if we want to be technical, dwarves should be like either they should be synonymous with Vikings or like people from Scandinavia, or
Yeah.
if we go kind of from Tolkien's subtext, they might be Jewish.
Either way, they're pretty
But
cool and fun.
yeah, but in D&D, there are analogs for basically every human race you can imagine. And the funny thing is, those races, even in D&D, are separate from our are separate from the mythical D&D races. It's one of the reasons why I never understood a lot of people's take on the movie Bright, because for some reason they believed that the existence of orcs would prevent interhumanitarian hardships. Like I think it was Lindy Ellis say that the history of Bright made no sense because if creatures other than humans existed, humans wouldn't argue amongst themselves.
I saw that video too. I agree on the fact that I think history would be kind of different, but I do disagree with that fact. Humans are still humans and are going to human.
Yeah, and what's more, it doesn't all the existence of other races in Bright means is there's another level up and another level down. So you know, as a hypothetical, Mark Zuckerberg, George Soros, Jeff Bezos, the fuckers who work for the European Union, they all exist, elves. And black slavery and shit like that still exists. But below them in the Bright universe, there were the orcs. Probably for very much the same reasons as usual. The elves were.
Well, if I remember correctly, they were hated primarily because they fought with the Dark Lord like 1,000 years ago, prior to the events of Bright. So,
right,
there's kind of a rational racism there. Oh my god, I just said that. What the fuck?
And things that are gonna get quote mined in about 5 seconds.
But
there's at least a justification there that doesn't have anything goddamn to do with racism. But right. In the context of the wider revisionist history of Bright, one of the reasons why black people eventually became the predominant slave class in the time before slavery was abolished was because black kings sold their own people into slavery, which is something that's very rarely if ever brought up, but also because on average black people are taller and sturdier and therefore make for better farm workers, which was the predominant thing that slaves were used for. And I'm not saying therefore it was good or therefore it was justified. I'm saying that was the rationale that begat the stupid bullshit. And therefore, in a world similar to Bright or in terms similar to D&D, you could make the argument if you really wanted to pull this class and race bullshit out of your ass, that by the same token, orcs would become the preferred slave in the Bright universe, and that's why orcs are lower on the totem pole than black people in the Bright universe, because they are sturdier and stronger even than black people would have been. Therefore, that would have made them excellent farmhands. And also, given that they had no Dark Lord to protect them post the defeat of the Dark Lord, they were easy pickings for similar reasons as lower class Africans in Africa were easy pickings for the kings that lorded over them.
You know what's weird?
Because bullshit.
Because Netflix, when the movie came, like after the movie came out, they released a video that kind of gave a small history of it.
Yeah.
And apparently, according to the lore of Bright, the first orc, no, not the first orc, the first ever Bright, which fought the Dark Lord, was an orc.
Honestly, I think that movie would have fared better if they had stuck that explainer video in front of the movie, kind of like Galadriel's exposition dump in Lord of the Rings.
Mm-hmm. Or, like you said, it would have been better if it was a TV show, like a series.
No, I think if they had, I think they still should have started with the movie, but I think definitely making a Bright TV show after the movie, or using the movie as a launch pad and then launching into the show would have been a good idea. Plus, when are we ever going to get a Bright sequel? I want that.
I think honestly, there should have been maybe. It's not bad or anything. I think it could have done well if it had uh, a once over, a couple of like maybe twice over on the script.
Yeah, it could have been better, but I'm just saying it wasn't bad per se.
Yeah, like I mean, it was written by Max Landis, so take it or leave it, I suppose.
I like the idea of a wand being basically the equivalent of a WMD, but I think a staff probably would have made more sense.
Mm. Yeah. Okay. Let's finish this part and then we can move on to more happy things.
Yes.
All right. According to Walker, these stereotypes create a shortcut for drama and conflict in a D&D game. The procedures that you undertake while playing a game help to create meaning, he says. Content and aesthetic to do that too, but content and aesthetic do that too.
Yeah.
But we can not underestimate the degree to which the verbs a player uses. The way in which
What?
they are incentivized to perform certain behaviors, both toward reward structures, but also just through the availability of action, produces meaning. What?
What?
I.
That.
Well, are you saying
I understood. I understood what he said, but I don't know how race is the thing.
Yeah, I don't get like if people do bad things in if they play the villain or something. Again, like it is fiction. It's a game, and you're allowed to play to whatever role you want to play.
Yeah, he's not saying that. What he's saying is the things you're limited to do have an impact on your experience, I think is the most charitable read I can make of that. He's making some gobbledygook postmodernist bullshit about how meaning is created rather than extant, which is bullshit, but
Yeah,
I'm willing to meet him halfway and say what he means is what you're capable of doing in a setting impacts the experience you're going to have.
I can.
My question is how the fuck any of this relates to the race point.
Okay, I might maybe what he says next might explain it better.
I hope.
D&D 5th edition is a game about killing people, he says. I believe to address the question of evil races, you need to revisit that as a core design element, because dungeon masters around the world want a reason to kick in the door and kill people. What?
What in the name of fuck is going on?
Hold on. There's more. That design requires antagonists for whom the solution of killing makes sense. When you have an evil race, that's very easy to do. I don't know that putting out a side book that says, "Oh, there's no more evil races," is going to change the play. Again, you can don't hurt yourself. You have a ring on that hand, remember?
Hmm?
You have a ring on that hand, remember?
Yeah, it's too small to act as like a brass knuckle or anything. But okay. Number one, D&D is not inherently a game about killing people. Any edition of D&D is not about killing people inherently. Yes, you can make campaigns that involve killing antagonists or what have you, but you could also make a campaign where you were tasked with like setting up a nation, or you could basically make a D&D campaign that was kind of like Civilization if you wanted to. Or you could make a romance themed D&D game where you're tasked with courting, courting another nation's prince or whatever the fuck. Yeah, first mistake is D&D isn't inherently about killing. Second mistake is just because a character has a natural predisposition towards a certain behavior does not mean they need to engage in it, and it doesn't mean that only people with that natural predisposition will engage in the behavior. I.e., just because in D&D, again, evil is a quantifiable force and series of behaviors, does not mean that a orc can't strive to be a better person, and it doesn't mean that all the evil people you will ever meet will be orcs. In fact, it doesn't even mean that the majority of people you will meet who are evil will be orcs, because orcs are a minority within the context of D&D. But being that as it may, that's complete bullshit. If you, as the DM, don't want to have any orcs in your setting, you don't have to have any orcs in your setting. So I don't know where the fuck you're getting the idea that because orcs used to have an evil predisposition, that means every villain you ever meet will need to be an orc. And second, and thirdly, orcs don't even make for very good like arch villains or anything, because they're sort of designed to be the muscle or the enforcers. They're not schemers, really. That doesn't mean you couldn't have a schemer orc, but generally speaking, orcs are not schemers. Holy fuck.
I am back.
Okay. Yeah, you came just in time because I just got done with the complete. Just what the fuck was that? Okay.
I mean, I got nothing really to say. I mean, there was a story, but I don't think it really works now. It was about how an SCW kind of fucked up. An SCW just kind of took control of the entire D&D campaign. And got mad because. Okay, so for context, I remember hearing this story about this SCW who joined like this D&D campaign, right? That
Okay.
I think he was gonna. I think the whole point was to try and fight a like Eldritch Being monster.
Okay. Right.
But the entire thing, like the ACW asked, how come we're not fighting for gay marriage in the land right now? Because that's it's prohibited in a medieval setting. So essentially, the SCW convinces everyone to do that. From what I gather, it was actually not bad. Like it was kind of a fun thing to do. It was interesting, story wise. And then because they didn't,
I mean, deal with the Eldridge being on the way.
yeah, everyone dies,
It just
and the
strangles.
SCW, and the SCW throws a hissy fit. That's kind of like the
Which honestly, hmm?
no, that was pretty much it. Like
Which
I don't have like that's what I can remember.
that almost sounds like a traditionalist wet dream. Like all this focus on gay marriage is going to destroy the world.
Uh,
Like I could see like an evangelical preacher saying that exact shit.
yeah.
like
Okay,
like
so
I could almost see like Pat Robertson being like, all this talk of gay marriage is gonna conjure Cthulhu and he'll destroy the world because we've turned our back on God.
okay, so yeah, we're gonna say the rest of that article for next week. And we're gonna move on to happier stuff real quick.
One can only hope.
Yeah, so this is from superherohype.com. Static and Matt Bomer headline DC's animated Justice Society film. We and I legitimately just found out about this a couple of days ago, thanks to Dalton talking to me. I actually provided this article though, so but I figured we'd talk about it.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so after more than 40 entries in the DC animated movie canon, members of the Justice Society are finally about to star in their own feature film. And
It's about freaking time.
Yeah, I think it follows in line with Man of Tomorrow. I haven't seen that movie. I kind of want to. If anyone's seen it, let me know if it's good or not, because it has that similar art style.
Probably. Which means this is the third DC animated universe movie reboot.
Okay. Yeah, the Hollywood Reporter, DC, and Warner Brothers Animation have set the voice cast for Justice Society World War II. I will say the still here is not great. Like it looks a little. I don't know. Like, I think they're trying to go for like what was it? A modernizing look while also paying homage to the originals. Like there's added detail and stuff. To the costumes, which look fine. It's more like like again, maybe it looks better in motion than a still. But I can see what people are saying. Like it looks like they're taking cues from Archer, kind of.
Which, to be fair, isn't a bad place to take inspiration from.
Yeah. I do think it has more fluid animation than Archer, which was always kind of more stiff.
Yeah.
I think what always worked for Archer was the dialogue and writing and anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God, Archer is one of the funniest goddamn shows.
It's actually also very deep as well.
Yeah. Which I mean, good God darn it, the writing is amazing, and I honestly am gonna look up the creators of Archer just to make sure I watch anything that guy does ever again.
Yeah. The new film reunites Matt Bomer and Stana Katic. Previously, Bomer and Katic lent their voices to Superman Unbound in 2013 as Clark Kent and Lois Lane, respectively. Huh. Wow. Yeah, Matt. Oh, so if you don't know who Matt Bomer is, not Bomber, Bomer. He plays Negative Man on Doom Patrol. Yeah, and also apparently voiced Superman before.
It's a small world after all.
Yeah. This time they are starring as two key members of the Justice Society, The Flash and Wonder Woman. Both actors have also played other DC characters in the past. Bomer currently appears as Negative Man on Doom Patrol, yeah, and also came pretty close to playing Superman in live action in the early 2000s. Wow.
This I did not know.
Neither did I. He looks good too, so I believe he's also the he played on a show on USA Network, White Collar, I believe.
Oh, okay. I think I know who he is now.
Yeah, he was like the main guy.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Katic voiced Talia al Ghul in Batman Arkham City in 2011. Wow.
It's a small world after all.
Yeah.
It's a small world after all.
Okay. Bomer and Craddock will be joined in the new film by a cast that features a handful of recognizable names. This roster includes Elisa Rotaru. She will be playing Black Canary. Damn it. We legitimately talked about this on Wednesday, and I can't remember these. I can't remember these actors then.
Yeah, I don't know who she is off the top of my head either.
Okay, so you have Chris Diamantopoulos. If I said that name wrong, I'm sorry. Playing Steve Trevor, Omid Abati, uh, Hawkman, Matthew Mercer, a great voice actor, and is the dungeon master of Critical Role. Plays our man.
I
Armin,
still need to do more research on that character because he's even obscure by my standards.
yeah. Okay, so Bomber will be playing kind of a modern day Flash. Okay, because you have Armin Taylor playing Jake Garrick. I'm looking that guy up now. Voiced a lot of anime.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Liam McIntyre as Aquaman. Ashley Throp, Iris West, Jeffrey Wren, Charles Halstead / the advisor. Keith Ferguson as Dr. Fate.
I will judge.
I will look him up.
Judgment.
Look him up right now. Okay, so voice actor. Thought has good pedigree for the most part.
Okay, well, the gauntlet has been thrown. I doubt that anyone will be able to do better with Dr. Fate than Oded Freyr did in
And
the original Justice League.
and Darren DePaul as Roosevelt. Right.
I love how Roosevelt is listed as though he's also a superhero. That's kind of amazing.
Okay, so Jeff Warmister, a veteran of several animated Marvel shows, such as shows including Guardians of the Galaxy and Avengers Assemble. I mean, those shows weren't great. It was like those Disney XD shows that were kind of cheaply made.
Those. Okay.
Is directing Justice Society World War II. Former Supernatural scribes or writers Megan Fitzmartin and Jeremy Adams wrote the script. Recently, Adams also wrote the next DC animated film, Batman: Soul of the Dragon. I've seen the trailers for that. It just looks really fun. Like it's like one of those kung fu exploitation movies.
But with Batman in them.
Yeah.
Although didn't they already kind of do that with Batman Ninja?
Never mentioned that movie.
Oh?
It's shit.
As in kill it with fire and smash it with a hammer kind of shit?
Forget his existence. Shit.
Oh dear. I didn't think it looked okay in the trailer. Fuck.
Yeah, that's the thing. Trailers are meant to sell you on something.
So I'm guessing all and any of the good things of it were in the trailer?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll be honest, it never really even grabbed me with the trailers.
Well, I hope for your sake and for my sake of not getting punched in the face that the new one is better.
So Soul of the Dragon, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I look. It looks good to me. Like I think it looks cool. Jim Krieg and Kimberly S. Moyer are producing the new movie. Justice League World War II is currently without a release date. What do you think of the casting choices for the upcoming film? I mean,
Yeah. Go ahead.
no, it's like I unfortunately don't know many of these actors or voice actors. I'm cautiously optimistic, like I am with a lot of stuff these days.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so yeah, I'm not. Again, I'm just rambling
Yeah.
at this point.
The voice cast seems good and all. I obviously will always be on the lookout for Dr. Fate because he is my favorite character in all of comics, and he keeps getting notoriously fucked over again and again and again. And I don't think anyone is ever going to do it better than Oded Freyr did in the 90s. So there. But I'm more concerned about the writers because they say they're from Supernatural, but I'm curious what era of Supernatural because that does make a difference. Because season 1 through 5 is pretty amazing. Season 6 and 7 kind of suck. Season 8 is also actually, I think, in my opinion, better than season 8, in my opinion, is better than the first 5 seasons. And then season 9 to 11 kind of suck. And then seasons 11 to 15 are pretty damn good. So, yeah, it depends on what parts of Supernatural they wrote for, which level of excitement I'm gonna have, and what episodes they wrote. Because yeah, but hopefully it'll at least be as good as a pretty good episode of Supernatural, which is pretty good.
All right, so catching up with the trailer from the Disney Expo thing. This was, I think this one has more meat just simply for the speculation that we nerds would do. Well,
Yep.
that nerd right next to me. So,
Yeah.
how much of a nerd do you have to be for another nerd to call you a nerd?
Several layers of nerd at least, which means that I must be an uber nerd because I get called nerd by other nerds all the time.
Hello.
Yeah, huh?
Yeah. But yeah, this is the What If trailer. I think this is kind of, besides, like, this series might be my number one for most anticipated show. In terms of Disney Marvel, like Loki's my second, and I think Winter Soldier and Falcon and Winter Soldier is like my third. Well, actually, no. No. WandaVision would be my third. Falcon and Winter Soldier would be my fourth.
Okay. I would put What If above Falcon and Winter Soldier as far as things I'm anticipating. But WandaVision and Loki pretty solidly kick its ass.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, I'll get more into it, and if anyone's got drinks, drink them because I'll be doing the director's cap because I haven't done it in a long while.
I need to, for your next birthday, I totally need to buy you a beret. So you can actually put a director's cap on.
You know, most directors actually wear like baseball caps, right?
Yeah, but that's a step down from the golden age of Hollywood. I say bring the beret back, goddammit.
I don't think I could pull it off, honestly.
Oh, hush.
Anyway, shall we banana?
We shall banana.
Space. Time. Reality. It's more than a linear path. is a prison of endless possibility. Well, that doesn't sound ominous at all.
Come on. Jesus. Who's voicing the Watcher?
Yeah, I don't know, but he's doing a pretty amazing freaking job at it.
The thing is, it sounds like a very familiar voice.
Yeah.
Okay, so Jeffrey Wright apparently voices him.
Fuck.
I don't know who that is.
His name is ringing bells, but I don't know where it's ringing bells.
Oh! He's Gordon. The Batman. He's James Gordon.
Oh well, this bodes well at the very least for him playing Commissioner Gordon.
Yeah, he's also been in Westworld, James Bond movies, the Daniel Craig ones. Yeah,
I've made no secret of my hatred for the Daniel Craig era for the most part. Casino Royale was insanely good, but they didn't go where they should have with it, which is returning to James Bond's pulpy roots.
No, but he is a good actor, and the fact that they have him voicing the Watcher is nothing short of awesome.
Yeah, and given that all of these MCU shows are canon, that means that if we ever see the Watcher in live action, he'll be doing the voice. Which, yes.
I mean, we did see the Watchers in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2.
We did.
Yeah.
But we didn't see you out to the Watcher.
Uh-huh.
We didn't see our Watcher is the thing.
Yeah. I also want to say that I like this animation.
Yeah, it's very, very cinematic.
Yeah, and that makes sense because it's the MCU. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, granted, a lot of MCU movies don't look cinematic. So
No, because they just don't know how to utilize. Again, get Chad Stahelski as like a cinematographer or some shit on the MCU. He knows how to use color. Goddammit.
Or the guy who works with Zack Snyder, the cinematographer that works with Zack Snyder a lot.
Yeah, because say whatever you want about the Snyderverse, one thing it wasn't was bad looking.
No, it looked pretty cool. Looked pretty good. But anyway, like what I was gonna say, and like this kind of director stuff from me. Shut up! I haven't done it in like a year. Okay, so
I'm getting you the beret. I'm so getting you a beret and one of the like clapper things they put in between scenes to mark things. I'm getting you a marker.
Clapboard, you mean?
Yeah.
But I like this animation because you don't see a lot of 3D animation, or at least good 3D animation, except for like in animated films. But this has like a cell shaded look, kind of like Borderlands.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that because it's kind of comic booky, which makes sense.
Yeah.
And it just, and I've seen a few 3D animated shows, like the one I can most closely compare this to is RWBY, RWBY.
Yes. Which honestly, at this point, needs to become part of your drinking game. because you mentioned that one about as often as I mention like Doctor Strange or something,
Yeah,
or Joker.
probably. It's just I'll save that rant for another time whenever we address Ruby or something. But it might be that they're using the same type of animation software that the Ruby crew is using. Like I don't know what they're using right now, but
It might be.
well, it looks like it. So, but the thing is that in Ruby, because it's made by Rooster Teeth, which is kind of a independent company, it's still kind of cheaply made, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't look as cinematic as this. Like, there's no dynamic lighting in it. There's no like.
Yeah.
It just doesn't look as good because there's I don't.
Because clearly this had Disney money behind it.
Well, that and also I think they took a lot of time to do this right. And the thing about Ruby too is, yeah, just keep drinking, folks. At this point,
do not play our drinking games with alcohol. You'll die of alcohol poisoning.
Oh yeah, no, seriously. But the thing about Ruby is they have this weird deadline thing where it basically they spend like I don't know 6 months on a full series, which is like 13 episodes. Just 6 months every year. And been doing that for like okay, if it's 2023, then it would be 10 years. So
7
years
or 8 now, technically.
Either way, it still looks like shit because everything just feels flat. This has volume. This has just amazing depth of field, and it just again like it looks good.
Yeah.
Because not only does it look, it just doesn't. It also has like a striking look. It has great visuals, and it looks cinematic. It's fun as well. Like in the first 20 seconds, I'm already invested in it because it just gripped me with everything.
Yeah.
Like barely any words have been spoken.
Yeah. My question is, are they going to touch on shit that happens in the comics? Like if the purpose of this is parallel universes and alternate timelines, well, eventually we're going to have to talk about the comics.
Yeah.
Because that would be really cool and really meta if they act, because they actually have, in the context of the comics Marvel multiverse, marked a given universe as the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think it's like universe. Is it Universe 1000?
I don't know. I did not pay attention to that.
I want to say it's like Universe 1000 or something. That's the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which means in the universes around them, in addition to this section of the multiverse, there's also the comic universe, which also means that whenever we do actually see the Living Tribunal in the MCU, it's going to be the Living Tribunal, because the Living Tribunal is a singular multiversial entity, i.e. there's only one of them in the entire multiverse.
Oh, hey, speaking of which, remember the 3 heads in the Loki trailers, in the Loki trailer last week?
Uh-huh.
Apparently it was Kang, like the Council of Kang.
Oh, well, fuck.
Because in Phase 4, Kang is supposed to be like kind of a main villain.
I'd save him for Phase 5, but whatever.
I mean, they're already doing time travel, so.
Yeah, they're gonna have to bring in Kang. And as much as I hated the fact that Endgame was just a glorified time travel clip show, it does at least set up time meddling, which means Kang. So
yeah.
Okay,
shall we? Banana?
Yep, we shall banana.
I was promised an army.
Oh, sorry. I got really enraptured.
You're adorable sometimes, you know that, right?
I'm sorry. It's just, again, like it's so good that I just want to keep watching it.
No, I'm not judging you. I'm just saying there are times where I find you adorable.
Yeah. But again, like these are things we kind of already knew what they were gonna do from like
Yeah.
leaked stuff.
We,
So
yeah, we had heard. I think the first story we ever heard was the uh Peggy Carter Super Soldier alternate universe,
so
which
technically
which
Captain Britain.
I see. I don't know because logically, yes, you would think she would have to be, but also Captain Britain is already a thing. So, are they just going to erase the actual Captain Britain from things to make her being Captain Britain as per like the British version of Captain America makes sense?
Well,
Or
I mean, you could. She just could be called Agent Carter, even though she's like wearing the Union Jack and stuff.
she could. This is the alternate universe I'm looking forward to the least, just because I have a strong suspicion they're gonna make it really, really forced.
I don't know. I mean, they have Steve Rogers being like a prototype, like a World War II mech version of an Iron Man armor, probably developed by Stark, which I think is going to be really cool. And I'm more curious on how their relationship will, how that version of Steve and that version of Peggy will operate together.
They made Captain America the First Avenger work too well because now all I'm thinking is, oh, Steve missed his shot.
I mean, he gets to become Iron Man essentially. So
Right, but that's not nearly the same. And I'm betting they're gonna try some kind of feministy bullshit with Agent Carter, which aside from anything else is not what Agent Carter deserves.
true.
Because she's too. Cause the, the the problem with making Agent Carter the super soldier is Agent Carter's awesome enough by herself that she doesn't need it. Like, and it's kind of an insult to Agent Carter to suggest that she does need it.
Mm.
In the same way that recently in Dresden Files they gave John Marcone Thorm Namchiel's coin of the Blackened Denarius, and I'm just sitting there like, but he was more badass when he was just a vanilla mortal who had the balls to stand up to a Titan just cuz.
Ooh. Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh.
I know Brainstormer has no idea what I'm talking about, but anyone who's read the Dresden Files knows what I'm talking about, I think.
Oh. I think I'm starting to get tired. Jeez.
This is the latest we've gone in a while because because the D&D article took us so long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Mhm.
Banana.
You have a super soldier.
You sure don't seem too freaked out about all this, kid. What you doing out there all by?
Okay, so since we did see it earlier, like 20 seconds, with T'Challa essentially being Star Lord.
Yeah.
Which I find really cool, and I can't wait to see that. I am wondering if they had Chadwick Boseman, prior to his death, unfortunately, voiced.
I think they did. I think this was actually the last thing he ever voiced he played T'Challa for. Which, who boy is that gonna drive up those ratings?
I think it would be pretty cool. Like, I think that might be one I'm really interested to see.
The only question I have here is the reason why Yondu picked up Peter in the OG timeline is because he was Ego's progeny. So is T'Challa in this universe going to be Ego's progeny? Because Black Panther as a Celestial. Yes, motherfucking please.
That's cool. So we see here a less disgruntled Stephen Strange. I will say the lips look a little weird on the characters.
Yeah, what are they gonna do to my boy? I mean, I don't like the MCU version anywhere near as much as I like the comic version, but he's still my boy. What are you gonna do to my boy, Marvel? What are you
Looks
doing?
like a bunch of hologlyphs. I don't know what the hell is going on here. Like again, I feel like it's kind of like a trailer I would do editing wise, which is show a lot of cool shots, not really give a lot of content. I mean, like give a story kind of a little bit in the first, which was like the narration.
Mm-hmm.
And then like mostly just action stuff or like just great shots to like interest people.
Yeah, I really don't like alternate timelines and parallel universes and shit because the shit they come up with doesn't make any sense and often shits on characters. So it's like I'm very protective of the status quo because the status quo kind of makes sense. If they can come up with something that makes sense outside of the status quo, then that's fine. But
Yeah,
often,
I feel like at some point we have to do like another like debate episode on the whole status quo of superhero worlds and stuff.
Mhm.
I feel like that'd be pretty interesting.
Because I'm not saying you can't make changes. That would be very, very stupid if you could never make changes. It's just oftentimes when it's these kind of things, like when it's Elseworld or when it's What Ifs or whatever, they use it as an excuse to make shit not make sense, and that bothers me.
Okay. All right. Shall we banana?
We shall banana.
Okay. Banana.
They're all by yourself anyway.
Exploring the world.
Sounds fun. But why stop at one world when we can show you all of them? I am the Watcher. I am your guide.
Okay. How is it that this looks a lot better than I think this is Doctor Strange right here? How does this library look so much better than the movie ones, which was actually kind of very small in comparison?
Maybe this is a universe where Caecilius never went evil. That might be
Yeah,
interesting.
but that wouldn't really explain why the library looked just like kind of like a single room. This looks like a grand expand. This looks like an actual like Mystics library. Is how one I always pictured.
Yeah. Yeah, the library in Kamar-Taj didn't look very impressive, but honestly, that was the least of my worries when I was watching the movie, so I just kind of went with it. Also, magical texts are rare, so I was just kind of like, yeah, that kind of works fine.
So I'm thinking, okay, since they did this part with the Watcher and stuff, God, this looks so good. I'm not, but, Watcher Shadow coming from Stevens.
My question is, if they're going to keep Doctor Strange's magic, how else are they going to twist him? Because frankly, in my head, every version of Stephen Strange should be a sorcerer. But, the what if has got to happen. So is the what if going to be what if he defeated Dormammu, or what if he defeated Dormammu differently, or what if he joined Dormammu, or what's the twist on this? How is this going to get M. Night Shyamalan? If that's the gimmick. Is everybody get M. Night Shyamalan? You get M. Night Shyamalan, and you get M. Night Shyamalan, and you get M. Night Shyamalan.
Okay. I think we get it. But I think the Watcher is going to act like an omniscient narrator because it says like he's going to show us the vast like all these different multiverses essentially.
And I'm good with that. I've been saying for ages they need to introduce more of the mystical and cosmic shit. So if we're starting with the Watcher, we're starting with the Watcher, and I'm good with it.
All right. Shall we?
We shall.
Banana.
Banana.
I am your guide through these vast new realities. Follow me and dare to face the unknown. And ponder the question.
So we get Marvel Zombies, which I'm sure a lot of fanboys are happy about.
I'm excited for that. Yeah, that's nice.
I do think it gets a little. If I remember correctly, the comics get really weird with zombies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the fact that they eat Galactus and can travel between universes, and because they have so much hunger. Like I like how they did zombies too in the Marvel universe as well. Like the more you eat of people, the more you can stay yourself. Which I thought was a really interesting concept because it's kind of like George A. Romero's, like I believe, second movie, or was it third? You know, where they got the zombies to talk, and like it says, it hurts being dead, and the only way it can stop hurting is by eating people or their brains.
Mm-hmm.
So it's similar to that, but also like they go a step further, which I'm just glad that they didn't do like, you know, just super powered zombies, essentially.
It reminds me a little bit even of the movie Warm Bodies, if you ever saw that. Where
it's been a while, but yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Where like the zombies could gain skills or gain knowledge based on the brains they ate.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why, if there's ever a zombie apocalypse, I am killing myself immediately so no one can eat my brain. Because fuck you. Nobody gets to be me but me.
Yeah. Yeah. Other than that, no, it looks like a good one. I'm very excited to see this. Maybe we will do some reviews of the Disney Plus shows.
I think we've got to. I mean, especially because WandaVision comes out like what, next week? Like next Friday.
Yeah, I do think not an episode by episode review like we're trying to do with Batwoman, because that was just taxing.
Yeah, no, let's make it the whole season or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be better. So yeah, I mean, granted, that would be like what, a couple months from now.
If we are reviewing What If, yeah.
Well, no, I don't mean What If. I mean like just the Disney Plus shows themselves, like with WandaVision, like because they'll do it weekly by week.
Yeah, I don't understand their release strategy for WandaVision, because they're revealing the first 2 episodes next week, and I don't know how many episodes this show is supposed to have.
I thought it was 8.
Oh, it's 8, so it'll probably be March before.
I mean, we could review the first 2 episodes. I think that would be best.
Yeah, that might work.
Yeah.
And then God only knows when Loki's coming out or when the other shows are coming out, because we're probably going to end up getting another round of lockdown shortly. Which means probably more delays.
For shows that go on a streaming network. That makes sense. Anyway.
I don't know. You know, the whole release strategy for Hollywood lately has been fucked, so I don't have any faith in anything working out what it's supposed to lately.
Right. Okay, folks. So I guess with all that, I want to say goodbye, adios, aloha, avida sayonara, peace, cheers, and